It's been about a week and a half since we had the Demons update come from Val. Obviously, there was a video talking about it 10 days ago now. And normally, I'm a little bit faster off the mark to get these videos out, but this is one that I wanted to take some time to think about. I also wanted to see if Val was going to walk back some changes. He has put out a hotfix to clarify some things, change some things, so I'm going to treat this as the release for now and talk about it. I'm going to timestamp things. I'm going to start off with why I don't like this update and why I think it's outside of the scope of the previous updates for Renegades, but also what outside the scope of what I think the Renegades update should be personally. Then I will talk about some stuff that I dislike on a rules basis. I think it's also a good time to just talk about where I feel like Demons should be as a faction. It's very easy for me to sit here and criticize without giving my views on where I think they should go, which I'd be interested to hear feedback on, because I have pretty firm sort of ideas of what I think each of the gods do, and I'm curious as to whether people's views align with what I'm saying. And then we'll go into the review as well, and we'll go through. This is Demons is a weird one. There's a lot of overlapping stuff in there. I think I've got a pretty decent grasp on it, but I'm definitely going to have missed something. If there's anything that you think I've missed, or any interactions that don't work in the way that I think they do, feel free to point them out below, and yeah, we can have a chat about those there. The main concern I have with this update for Demons is that the change to immune psychology is, in my mind, a fundamental change to how Demons are as a faction thematically. Val's obviously made plenty of arguments in his favour about why he thinks they should work different ways, about how psychology works differently in this edition compared to previous editions. With all that said, it feels to me like a fairly fundamental core change to how the faction plays on the tabletop, and doesn't really line up in my mind with how the gods work. So I dislike it from, this doesn't line up with how I see Demons to function personally. However, I also think this is a very major change that steps out of what Renegades has said that they were going to be, in aims of. The reason we have Renegades, the whole reason that they have come to be, is because Games Workshop has released half-baked draft rules that were not finished. They were, as I understand, going to be released as a faction up until relatively late in the design process. They didn't get finished playtesting, they didn't get finished tweaking, and they just released them as here are some rules, feel free to use them to get into the game, but don't expect to ever have any updates on these. Games Workshop has been consistent with the messaging there, and they've said, hey, we're not supporting these factions, don't expect anything for Demons, Chaos Dwarves, anything like that. And to an extent, regret. To an extent, I respect that. I don't think it's a good decision. As I understand that, it's to do with internal decision-making between studios in terms of who's allowed to use which models. And it's to do with internal company politics. That aside, they've been very clear on what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. What's not going to happen is they're not going to support it. We're now at a point where we are coming up to another major FAQ. We should be getting it ideally within a month or so of this video going up. It sounds like, from rumours, that it's going to be a fairly big change to how the game functions, and that's going to leave legacy factions even further behind. So when Renegades came out initially, I was not in favour of them, because to me, it was too soon. As far as I was concerned, the game had not been around for long enough that they needed the support in the way that they got it. Whether or not that's accurate, that's how I felt at the time. My views have updated, because I feel like the work that Val did with I don't know what to call it, the second Renegades set of rules, not these draft rules, the version that came after the first set where he updated them. I feel like that put Renegades in a pretty reasonable spot. There were some reasonably big changes to how some of the factions played, some, pretty big swings, but by and large, it was just, it's one document. You can still see it. You go to the website, they've got it hosted on squarebase.com. I think they've still got it hosted at. You can see that the changes are within the realm of what has been set out by Games Workshop. And that has, at the start of the Renegade Draft project, felt like the way that things were done. So Dark Elves are still kind of mediocre, but I think they're a lot more fun, a lot more flavorful, and they've been brought in line with the other elves. Big problem, elves are kind of crap. So that's the scale of the updates that we saw at the start of the project. Things have then escalated a little bit over time. So things like the, I've forgotten the name of it, the rule that ogres have where you can charge over a certain distance and ignore low linear obstacles. Importantly, this is, something that is relevant to the game, not because we're expecting to see loads of low linear obstacles on the tabletop, but earthen ramparts and sappers both impart the ability, the defensive capabilities of low linear obstacles. So this is a very powerful rule, and it's not something, I think, that has come from a previous edition or anything like that, but it is something that, I don't know, it feels in line with how the faction goes. It's a lot of raw power, but inarguably a lot of factions have a lot of raw power in other ways. The argument that I've heard Rob make a lot is talking about fanatics, where, if Val was to write fanatics, they'd be panned because, they're kind of ridiculous. And I think that's a fair argument. So things that are thematic but strong and also ideally pulling from previous editions, I think kind of fall in line with what I expect from Renegades now. Then, stuff like adding Chaos Dwarf warriors to the unit, I don't think is necessarily super in line with it, but it's also adding a unit is not the end of the world. It didn't feel necessary, but it's also not particularly negative. It doesn't feel like it takes away from the experience of anyone who plays. It's just kind of a little bit extraneous. I would say if this was a document that I was sending to draft, for example, the Chaos Dwarf one, I would say cut the Chaos Dwarf Warriors. I don't think they necessarily have a place where, the book has ended up, given the points cost they're at, and that there's competing, stat lines in there. Anyway, those I feel like were mostly in line with what I'd expect from what is, realistically, it is homebrew that is widely adopted. So my problem with Demons is the change to instability is a big flavor change in my mind to the faction. Part of why it took me so long to get this out is I wanted to talk to a lot of people. I had a lot of conversations with people who were, pro Renegades, anti Renegades, kind of in the middle, which is honestly where a lot of the player base is. A lot of people don't really care either way. They don't play the Renegade factions. They're not opposed to people having updated rules to make the faction play better. And generally, the vibe that I've been getting back is there are some people who are very in favor of, these big swing changes, and that's fine. People are allowed to have their preference for how things are balanced and play. But a lot of the people I've talked to, and my personal feelings as well, is this pushes them away from where Games Workshop has the faction. It's been mentioned that Demons didn't have immune psychology back in 5th edition. My counter-argument to that would be 6th edition Hordes of Chaos came out in 2002, which is now 24 years ago. So for the entire time I've played the game, and maybe this is part of my personal bias, but the entire time that I've been playing, when I started playing 23 years ago, Demons have been, there have been some immutable things about them. They have been unstable. They have been immune to psychology. They have had, defense that's weaker against magic. That one is something that's been cut in terms of the previous versions of Demons, where you got your ward save against everything as opposed to just against non-magical attacks, which I think is fine. I don't think that necessarily ruins the flavor, but it makes them stronger in a way that is reasonable. I don't want this section to go on much longer. I do have actually quite a lot more thoughts on the topic, and it could be a full video on its own, but I don't think I really want to go into it. I don't really want to have a debate about it. I just kind of want to... I think the main thing is that when I've previously said, actually, I've come around to Renegades, I am open to using them. I support the idea of Renegades to make the unplayable factions more playable. That was in line with what we've seen with previous versions of Renegades. This is not a version of Renegades that I would co-sign. So I think more this is just, in a way, given that I've previously endorsed the idea of Renegades, by not saying anything on how I feel about this version, I feel like there is a tacit, unspoken support for them. And I do not like the way that the special rules have been changed for Demons. I think it is outside of the scale of what I think Renegades, in terms of the community uptake for them, should be. Another rule that I just want to very quickly talk about, this is not on a flavor version. In fact, I think the flavor on this is pretty reasonable. I do dislike Reign of Chaos, the start of turn table where you roll to see how your ward save is affected. There are multiple concerns I have about this. The first of all is people are horrendous at remembering how to do start of turn rolling. This is not your opponent's, it's not on your opponent to remind you. If you forget to roll on the table, and for anyone who hasn't seen, we'll get to it when we get into the document. You roll a d6 at the start of your turn, and on a 2 to 5, you just have a 5 ward save against anything, and then on a 6, you get a better save against non-magical attacks, and on a 5, you get a worse save against magical attacks. Basically, you lose your save against magical attacks, and you're slightly more likely to be banished when you take demonic instability tests. The first thing there is people are bad at remembering how to roll tables. This is something that you see with just general start of turn rules. I mean, a great example of this is remembering to dispel remains in play spells. And those are things that have actual, often, markers on the table. There might be a vortex on the table, or there might be stuff like that. Anyway, this is speaking from experience. People are bad at remembering to do stuff at the start of turns. And as an experience for opponents, when you have a rule where your durability relies on how you roll at the start of turn, if you forget and then your opponent makes their movement and goes to take their, make some attacks or do some shooting or whatever, and then you go, oh, I need to roll on the table, roll a 6. Actually, I've got a 4 ward against non-magical attacks. That sudden boost in durability it's a massive feels bad. And I'll talk more about the rolls on the table in a second, but just the potential for the frustration involved with having forgotten this table, I think, is quite high. Also, tables which give you boosts, generally pretty good. Even the Cathay one, which was just, 50% of the time you get +1 movement, / there are other things on there, but that's a lot of the effect, and it's tied into their, the wins where they get bonuses to dispel or whatever. That had to be nerfed from just 50-50 to one or the other, and then something else. I don't really know what my point is with pointing that had to be nerfed, but start of turn tables are something that I'd be very careful with, and I would never want to tie something super strong into there, personally. Second of all, I don't think you should tie durability of an army to a dice roll at the start of the turn. In theory, you have some level of mitigation for it, in terms of you can choose not to go in if you think that, oh, actually I rolled a 1, I'm not going to have a ward save against my opponent's attacks because I've got lots of magical attacks, or I rolled a 6, this is a good turn to go. I think this is a very poor play experience, mostly for your opponent, but also for you, depending on what you're playing against. It's mostly for the opponent. Anytime that I think about armies that have widespread invuln saves, the point where they hit this is overwhelming and this feels bad to play against is always when they start breaking into that 4-up ward save. This is across multiple game systems. I'm talking, a lot of my experience comes from 40k. Armies that can have high ward saves across the board can feel very rough to play against, and that's when you're playing a game with much lower variability in terms of higher numbers of dice and, more rerolls and stuff like that. But also higher numbers of dice. It's really easy to just spike and pass all your saves. On a 4-up ward save, the faction that I'm thinking of, Custodes in 40k, people, it used to be a thing where you'd be like, oh, just, better lucky than good. I passed all my 4-up ward saves, guess I win the game. And that's a really unfun experience to play against. And tying that into, oh, I've just rolled a 6, I guess I have just a mass that is mathematically now difficult for my opponent to overcome. That doesn't feel like a rule that is positive in any way. I don't think that having durability tied to it should happen at all. If you want to do some sort of start of turn phase, I think it needs to have something that has a low to moderate effect on the game, where you can nominally choose how to make some differences, but it probably shouldn't matter too much. But there should not be widespread 4-up ward saves across the board for any faction at any time in Fantasy. There is just not enough output to even be able to blend through that consistently. It's very concerning. Yes, it's technically a 4-up ward save against non-magical attacks, but if we're being realistic, look at your faction. Do you typically bring massed magical attacks outside of maybe, Beastmen obviously have the ability to spam Vile Tides, because they have Spectral Doppelganger and a couple of good magic weapons, and then there's other things like Warriors of Chaos, for example, can bring magical hand weapons, but even with stuff like magical hand weapons, there's often a trade-off. You're not realistically seeing a lot of like foot warriors or something like that. So if you've got characters that have, let's say, you've got a Chaos Lord on Dragon, for example, you probably want to attack with your great weapon, but if you're going into something that's got a 4-up ward save, you then have to do the maths of, is it better for me to use my magical hand weapon and lose the strength and AP bonus of the great weapon, for example? So, if you're going into something like a Bloodthirster with an armor save, the great weapon's probably still better. So even though you've normally got magical attacks on your profile, you actually don't have magical attacks in a way that's meaningful in terms of reducing the defense of the Chaotic Surge of a roll of a 6 on the Reign of Chaos. This is doubled down on, in my mind, by the fact that if you're theoretically, you could look at the game as a whole and say, actually, there's quite a lot of magic missiles. I would argue that magic missiles have taken a back step outside of factions that can do ridiculous things, like layering additional +2 to cast on all of their wizards very comfortably, looking at you Beastmen. But there are also plenty of ways to shut down casting in Demons. I'm not saying that they make casting impossible, but, there's a banner that gives -1 to cast if you wanted to lean into that. There's easy access to magic resist for Khorne. Now that Khorne can have unit champions with taking items, they can up their magic resist pretty easily. There's ability to, there's a Tzeentch upgrade that makes you better at dispelling. I can't even remember what it is off the top of my head. There's a lot of stuff in there that gives you the ability to affect enemy dispels. Oh yeah, there it is, Power Vortex. Within the wizard's dispel range, enemy wizards suffer a -1 to cast. You could very comfortably go for the Khorne banner that gives -1 to cast if you can see it, Power Vortex to give enemy wizards -1 to cast, and suddenly a level 3 wizard or a level 4 wizard is casting at +0. So if the argument is they're vulnerable to magical attacks, they shouldn't then also have the ability to shut down casting pretty comprehensively outside of maybe Beastmen doing a very good job at doing casting there as well. So I think I don't like the start of turn table in general, but I'm not overly opposed to how it works. If you want to have some sort of table, I think that is something that has happened for previous editions. There's definitely something you could play around with there. I don't think you should ever give army-wide 4-up ward saves to any faction, and I think that's a real point of concern I have for this, in terms of games shouldn't be tipped on their head through a stat check where you got lucky because you rolled a 6, as opposed to playing well or positioning well, or, good generalship, as opposed to just getting lucky at the start of a turn. With all that said, I kind of wanted to just see how people feel about how the faction should perform broken into the different gods. I actually really like a mixed god army. I understand the argument against it. Thematically, the gods hate each other, and theoretically, you should want to play monogod. That's super fair. I like the ability to play multiple different things. I think just in terms of, as a concept, in terms of the way the game is played, being able to say, I want a durable unit, I want a hard-hitting unit, I want a fast unit, and I want something that casts well. I think that's a fun way of bringing the different strengths of the factions together. But I also think all of the factions should have pretty clearly defined strengths and weaknesses, and I think that is something that, even if you want to play mono god, and maybe there should be some sort of buff for playing mono god, this is something that I've mentioned before, to Val, not publicly, but it's hard to say where or what that would be, and obviously there is the mark, and the marks have been updated. We'll get to those in general, but I want to talk through how I feel the four gods should function, and I'm curious to see where people agree or disagree. So please do give me some feedback on this, because this is something that I want to mostly a gut check on the fact that I'm not, I don't have weird ideas about things here. Anyway. So, I forgot to talk about this right at the start, so I just want to slip this in before I talk about the rest of the gods. I think, my personal feeling, is that Warhammer Fantasy, despite how fun I think it is to have objectives to fight over and things like that, it is, at its core, a kill point-based game. And for my memory of the game over the entire time I played it, which was mostly 6th and 7th, it was a kill point-based game there as well. I don't feel like it's ever really been massively like a secondary scoring game where, if we're talking about something like Warhammer 40k, standing on objectives and completing objectives are the things that are important to you. But in fantasy, you got to get, you got to take your pound of flesh, very fitting for some of the gods that we have on here. So with that in mind, I feel like, given that the way you get points is by killing stuff, and you don't have to kill stuff with attacks, you can kill stuff by running it down, which has its own issues in this edition, but that's by the by. I feel like, to an extent, every god, or every god, I don't want to say every unit, because units don't have to be killy. I think every mono god should be able to be run and have a certain level of output. And by output, I mean how you look at the end of a combat. You don't have to necessarily have got all of your combat res, or your combat res differential through killing stuff, but I think you have to be able to go toe-to-toe with other units of, comparable or slightly worse than you, and be able to win by a margin, even if it's because you've got loads of static combat res. Maybe, and we'll talk about this more on a case basis, Khorne should kill a lot, but maybe Nurgle doesn't have to kill a lot, but it reduces your combat res, or has ways of getting additional combat res. Makes you... They take less damage, so you get less combat res, and there's other ways to build around it. But yeah, anyway, my general pitch for balancing demons is that while the external stuff is fun and cool, I think you do, at your core, need to be able to just do a certain amount of output so that you can win fights. Especially given that we're in this sort of like very skewed Hero Hammer edition. Hopefully the FAQ coming soon fixes that, and we'll see more infantry and maybe even more cavalry and stuff like that, as opposed to it just being all characters all day. But yeah, that's where I think faction should be. And I want to be clear, it's not all units should have that value, because there is value to units outside of just killing things. But I think every faction within Demons should be able to win combat into the correct targets by a certain amount, whether it's through actual kill combat res, or through reducing enemy combat res, or through, bringing more static combat res, however that's going to work. So, starting off with Khorne, I think, obviously, this is the martial god. Typically, you're going to see good weapon skill across the board there. I think it should have moderate speed and moderate durability. It shouldn't be, as tanky as Nurgle, but it shouldn't be as squishy as Slaanesh. It should hit hard. Something that I think Khorne struggles with in this edition, especially, is it doesn't have the number of attacks it probably should do. I think this is hard to resolve, because we don't necessarily... I don't think infantry's in a place where it's, you look at bloodletters and you go, oh, they're terrible, but infantry's kind of terrible in general. So if you're building without some very specific parameters to make infantry work, it's very difficult to make them work if their job is to kill stuff. So it's hard to say what they should and shouldn't be, but I think generally the number of attacks they have should probably go up. Also, magic resist. Khorne hates magic, should have magic resist. All of these things, I feel like, are pretty standard. I don't think there's going to be much disagreement there. I don't think Khorne should be charge reliant. In my mind, obviously there's stuff like impact hits for the blood crushers and stuff like that makes a lot of sense. But when I think of Khorne, I think of it in terms of like endless battle and massive battlefields of just, fields of bloodletters just slogging away until there is nothing left to slog. It's not they hit hard, they hit fast, and they're done. It's that they just keep going. It's a relentless, there is a mountain of skulls, as opposed to just, it's a short-lived affair. So I think Khorne's damage ideally should be unpinned from charging, and Furious Charge is a very easy way to give a conditional buff to the output of Khorne. I don't like it for Khorne thematically. For me, it doesn't feel right. I feel like Khorne should just generally have, you know, maybe they're better in some way because of the charges, because of the impact hits, but I think they should generally just have more attacks. So like maybe we don't give a second attack to every Bloodletter, but the riders of the Blood Crushers, maybe they should have, you know, an extra attack in there and just generally be more in line with what you'd expect to see for Monstrous Cavalry. So I think it's a difficult line to walk, but I feel like personally Khorne should just be good in combat all of the time, and that should be their niche. They're always good in combat. They're also, in my mind, more quality over quantity. Not to say that they shouldn't have a decent number of attacks, but I don't think you should get, like, you know, an infantry model with 3 attacks. That, it seems ridiculous to me for Khorne. It's not in line with what I think. So maybe the buff is you make their weapons better. Maybe they have effectively at initiative great weapons. Is that too good? Probably not for infantry. These are things that might have to be relooked at, you know, post FAQ, maybe things change. But I feel like making Khorne good all of the time, as opposed to making them a charge-focused faction, would make sense to me. Moving on to the, in my mind, in some ways, the mirror of Khorne, the other, I feel like the other melee-focused god. I know that Slaanesh is seen across all of the Warhammer IPs as the fast god. The problem is, and I've now remembered to go back and insert the talking about how I feel like demons should be balanced overall. Being fast is all well and good. If you can't win any fights, you're kind of struggling there. There are limited points you can pick up without destroying units on the tabletop. And while maybe there is, you know, joy to be had in a faction that can not interact with its opponent in that sort of way and just slip round the back and get the, you know, baggage train and stuff like that in a very sort of Eldar, Drakari, well, more Eldar sort of way from various versions of 40k. I think they, in my mind, Slaanesh is like the tin opener faction. Sure, they're fast, so in my mind that says that they're probably going to be charge reliant. You better pick your fights correctly. You better use that mobility that you've got to make sure you're getting the charges that are going to get you the fights that do well for you, and you can get buffs on the charge. So like Furious Charge to me is a natural fit for Slaanesh in the way that I don't know that it fits for Khorne. I think they should have high speed, and I think they should be low durability. I think that Slaanesh should be the genuine glass cannon faction. I think they should be, if you look at them funny, they will fall over. But if you can't ever turn around fast enough to catch them in your gaze, good luck, because they are going to come and, you know, turn you into an empty tunic tin. I think you know, rules that go with that, and obviously I've talked about not wanting the ability to flee. I don't think I went into it in massive depth. I just talked about it thematically. I don't think Slaanesh should be able to flee. I don't have a problem with them having evasion. I don't know why thematically that's different in my head. Maybe it's because there are immune psychology models in the game that do have immune psychology and also evasion. I'm talking about like Sisters of Avalon, for example. So in my head, they are two separate things. Is that, you know, a little bit of splitting hairs? Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of sort of thematic hypocrisy. It's hard for me to say. But, you know, I think skirmish on a lot of stuff for Slaanesh, which they do have in a lot of places. And if you wanted to give them evasion across the board, I think that would make sense. But, yeah, I think they should be, you know, they should do lots of damage. They should be very squishy. They should be low strength, but more attacks. Tin opener style, you know, having decent AP there, potentially having decent AP on the charge and having worse AP the rest of the time. That all makes sense to me. In terms of the stuff around them, the debuffs they have, and I think this is something that you do see pretty well with demons so far, is the debuffs they have should be disruption, as opposed to being specifically, you know, we'll get to them there, but I think it should be things that mess up how your opponent wants to play, but there needs to be layers to that. So there's one that's been changed. I can't remember if it's been hotfixed to be undone, but Making people have to charge you, probably fine with some rolls, but there needs to be some level of control in there. Anyway, and I think Slaanesh is really the god of quantity over quality. I think with Slaanesh, I expect to see a lot of strength 3. That's kind of the middle ground there that I'm expecting to find. Moving on to Nurgle, my favourite to paint, that's for sure. I'm a big fan of Nurgle models and how they can look on the tabletop. Next time I do Nurgle, maybe I'll learn how to do oil washes. Who can say? I think of Nurgle as the tar pit god. This is the god that when it gets there, or if you get to it, you're going to have a real tough time shifting it, and that's going to be a problem for you. I think it should have slow speed and high durability, so the mirror or the inverse of what we get with Slaanesh there. I think they should have less overall output. And again, when I say output, I don't necessarily just mean their ability to kill stuff. I mean their ability to win on combat res. I think you should still be able to do so, but I think you shouldn't go head-to-head with a unit of comparable points and expect to win a fight. But you should also not expect to die anytime soon. I think it's okay for Nurgle units to lose small and not feel too bad about it, but that you then need to be able to bring other things to bear to affect that. So maybe there's debuffs in there, maybe, there are ways for Nurgle to juice themselves up to overcome that lack of output that they initially have. Regen as well, obviously very comfortably tied to the faction. Just feel like that's very thematic for Nurgle. And it goes well with the high toughness that they normally have. Regen's a little bit weird in terms of fantasy and in terms of durability, because it does mean that they're less likely to die, but they're still giving up a lot of combat res, so I'm not really sure thematically that it does exactly what I want it to do, but I think that's also okay. Like, they're not Troll Horde, they're not going to be breaking and fleeing, so as long as they're not breaking and losing too many models to combat res, it's probably fine. As for the other sort of angles for Nurgle, where I've seen Nurgle be interesting across the multiple, like the other games that I've seen them played in, and I don't know how much this has been explored in fantasy, is I think Nurgle as a debuffing faction is actually really interesting. So in this case, it could be debuffs to defenses. That's a common one. I don't really want to see Nurgle buffs in the way that you might see for like Death Guard in 40k, where they have an aura that debuffs you. I kind of think that doesn't really translate super well in my mind to Warhammer Fantasy, but stuff that makes you worse in combat. One of the obvious things I think is like the actual Legacy PDF document. Their weapons have Strength User, AP 0, Armor Bane 1, poison attacks for their hand weapons, if I remember off the top of my head. And I think that's fine. But that's probably just not going to cut it in terms of doing anything in combat. But instead of giving them AP, what if you gave them an aura of enemies are -1 to their armor save when they're in combat with this unit? There is like a seeping decay that is thematic to the faction, and it buffs their output in a way that feels thematic. This is probably the least fleshed out, unintentional pun, the least fleshed out I've got here, but I think being able to debuff your opponent is generally the way that I would expect Nurgle to get some of that output that I was talking about, where all factions should be able to win combats and do well there. There are other debuffs. I think they should be able to debuff enemy combat res. Maybe, that comes in the form of a banner that gives them, enemy units are disrupted when they charge you. There's disrupted, and the other one, lose rank bonus, basically, is what I'm trying to say when they charge you. Or their output is lower. Obviously, they do have the Nurgle rule, which is 6s to hit you, -1. 6 to hit you, you have to re-roll. I think that's fine. I think it's pretty uninspired and not a particularly good rule, but it exists. I don't know that we necessarily need to rewrite something like that does function, even if it's a bit dull. But those are the sort of debuffs that I'm thinking. And then their buffs, obviously toughness is something that they should be able to buff. So that would be something along the lines that I'd expect to be seeing there. So getting up to that toughness 5 or toughness 6 or whatever. I think that's a very common angle that you'd expect to see Nurgle doing well in. Last but certainly not least, there is Tzeentch, and this is one that I think you have to be very careful with in terms of getting it correct. And the reason for that is it feels bad to play against shooting armies that mathematically just win. When we were talking about Cathay, obviously the shooting that Cathay could bring, if you weren't a shooting army yourself, you couldn't interact with them, and if you were a shooting army, you probably lost because they were going to shoot you better. That's the sort of, people have bad memories of playing against dwarves, for example. Like, old school dwarves where the artillery was actually good, and they were able to just get you before you got to them. Shooting is dangerously binary in, a you go, I go sort of game, which I do not want Warhammer to change from turn-based, just to be clear. But yeah, I think you have to be careful with it, but it is also, I think, the identity of Tzeentch is shooting-based. Shooting and magic are the two things that I think of when I think of Tzeentch. So I think they should have the best ranged output out of all of the factions, and I think they should have less melee output than anyone else. Probably on par with Nurgle, or maybe worse than Nurgle, potentially. But I think they should have poor melee output. Generally, I'm not opposed to there being, I've tooled up my Lord of Change to be able to do Spectral Doppelganger shenanigans. Woo, now it goes around and hit things. I think the slight problem is, in terms of output, I believe that is actually the best source of melee output. I haven't looked too closely at how juiced up you can make, a Bloodthirster. Maybe the new Bloodthirster is better, but the at minimum, I would say the Lord of Change is the second best, at least, of the gods in terms of output. So whether or not that's a problem is maybe something to look at. They should be moderately fast, but also slippery. What slippery means in terms of demons, I don't know. I actually don't know how I want them to be slippery, but it's definitely thematically how I think of them. They should be spell-focused, and I think they should have debuffs for enemies. There's a theme of change, so changing their stats, or, changing stats is like a big thing to me that leaps out as a Tzeentch thematic ability, but then also having access to abilities that twist fate, like being able to reroll dice in a way that other factions can't, I think is generally good. This is something that I would say we definitely don't want to be too much across the board. Having played games where factions have the ability to just, use pre-rolled dice or have rerolls everywhere, there's definitely a point you can get to where it becomes oppressive and not fun. But having it limited in the way that I think it was already in the Legacy PDF, where you've got the ability to buy an upgrade on your characters that gives you the ability to reroll one die per turn. That feels very Tzeentchy to me. So these are the things that I would want to double down on in terms of the Chaos Gods. So, like I say, I think it's very easy to sit here and criticize as to things not lining up with how I would expect things to go. I don't think demons necessarily need more power baked into their core rules, the things, that make them a demon. I think a little bit more power tied into their mark is fine, and then also maybe just having upgrades on their unit cards is something that I'd like to see. I did some maths. I'd love to see, Slaanesh get Furious Charge, and then their Piercing Claws get the Halberd treatment, where on the charge they get an additional pip of AP. It does still not as much damage as you might think. It's pretty good. It's solid. You'll do a decent amount of wounds, but then if you compare it to something like, a lance of 6 Bretonnian Knights charging into the front of a ranked up Horde unit, for example, and then you compare it to the amount of output that the Slaanesh Seekers, 6 of them, charging into the front of the same unit. Obviously, you've got mobility. The argument is you shouldn't go into the front. Anyway, just as like a pure apples-to-apples comparison, because you don't bring static combat res when you're in skirmish or open order, you're maybe not bringing banners and stuff like that, although you can do. It was surprisingly close, basically. What I'm saying is, that unit of Knights of the Realm, the actual combat res swing in terms of turning off enemy combat ranks with the first charge ability ended up being a lot closer than I thought it might be. That's kind of irrelevant, but it's just something that I feel thematically would make sense. Make them gooder on the charge. I just really like Slaanesh. I want to go fast. I want to play beep beep, and I want to make positional mistakes and get blown off the table. With all that out of the way, we're now just going to look at the rules as they are, not going to necessarily criticize anything in here unless there's something that we haven't talked about that I think doesn't work thematically or more rules-wise, less thematically. So this is going forwards just the actual review of the document. If you're just joining me now, welcome. You've probably skipped 30 minutes of me talking, but yeah, we're gonna get into it. We're just gonna treat it as what it is on the page and go from there. So let's have a look at the Legacy Army list. As I've mentioned previously, but I want to just mention it again, I think actually demons are pretty darn complicated. There's a lot of overlapping stuff that you can do, and I think between reading quite a bit of stuff, talking to people, I've got a relatively good handle on how the army functions. If there is anything that you think I've missed, please do let me know down below, and you know, we can have a look at whether things do function in the way that I've understood them to do. So a lot of these changes are in blue, which means that these are changes that were in the previous version, the sort of widely accepted version of the Renegades that went out a year ago, more, whatever it was. So, not a lot of change here. Greater Demons, you can have 0 to 1 per 1,000 points and per unit with the same demonic alignment. I did have this pointed out to me relatively recently. Credit to Pip, who has... I've read a lot of his points and thoughts on this, which he's verbalized some interesting things. The Demon Prince, and this is not new for the document, the Demon Prince, if you mark it, say, for example, Tzeentch, unlocks your ability to take a Tzeentch Lord of Change, a Tzeentch Grand Deepen. That feels weird to me, and I don't really know why. And also, a Herald unlocks the Greater Demon. I feel like maybe this limitation here should just be per non-character of the same demonic alignment. I don't know if it matters particularly. It's just thematically it feels a little bit odd. And again, this is not a criticism of this document. This is just, I think it might even be the same in the Legacy document. I'm not going to go back and check. That's so out of touch and irrelevant at this point that who cares? But yeah, it just feels a little bit weird that you can have stuff unlocked by demon princes, or a herald can unlock a greater demon. Yada yada. Anyway. Moving on. 0 to 1 Greater Demon per 1,000 points, and you're also capped to needing a unit of the same demonic alignment. Honestly, that's pretty easy. And then the same with the Heralds here, only it's not 0 to 1 per 1,000, it's 0 to 1 per unit with the same demonic alignment. Maybe there's... Nope. I was going to say maybe there's some stacking in terms of putting, does a Herald of Slaanesh unlock another Herald of Slaanesh? We're not going to go down that road. We're just going to treat it at face value, and we're going to move on. Core, you've got the 4, the single marked units in terms of the Bloodletters, Plague Bearers, Demonettes, Pink Horrors, and then you've also got Furies as well, which can be marked as any of the 4 gods. If you have a general who's a demon of X, the following may be taken as core: Fleshhounds for Khorne, Nurglings for Nurgle, Seekers for Slaanesh, and then Blue Horrors and Brimstone Horrors for Tzeentch. All of these are honestly pretty playable, I think, and to have very specific roles that I would like to use them for. I'm generally not a huge fan of swarms if they have, some sort of instability, whether it's demonic or undead. But it's large piles of wounds that give you the ability to score because they're in core. So generally decent here with core, and again, no changes as you might expect. Special. All of the things you'd expect to see here: Fleshhounds, Blood Crushers, Nurglings, Beasts of Nurgle, Seekers of Slaanesh, Fiends of Slaanesh, Seeker Chariots of Slaanesh. I'm really looking forward to talking about the Chariots. I think they are in a very interesting spot now. The Horrors, Brimstone and Blue, Screamers of Tzeentch, Flames of Tzeentch, all of that good stuff. And then also, in the way that it unlocks stuff in core, there's also unlocking in special. If your general is a demon of Khorne, you get a Soul Grinder, which is Khorne only, that you can take in special. Nurgle can take Plague Drones. Slaanesh can take Hellflowers, one of the types of chariots, and then Tzeentch can take Burning Chariots as well. I don't understand why this is Soul Grinders, because there is the Skull Cannon that exists in Rare. I kind of just feel like just allow a Skull Cannon to exist. Would that be a problem? Maybe that's a balance decision. I don't know that I'd be super worried about seeing a third cannon on a chariot. I think they're decent. I think they're pretty solid, but I'm not sure that a third one sort of breaks the game for me. Not a major complaint, just is what it is. Demonic Herald, you can upgrade to be your BSB for 25 points, and they lose Hold Your Ground, they gain Demonic Locus. Then there are allies. This is something that does not affect the game the way that I play it. This is not something that you will see at tournaments, but it's nice to have these if you want to play them in home games. So I'm in favor of the ability to do so. I just don't really have any thoughts on it. Same as, this box here for allies. So I'm not going to talk about those, but it's, it's good to have in for people who want to use them. Moving on to the special rules. There is the Catch All Demonic, which gives a whole host of special rules. Again, very typical. You've seen this for multiple editions. And the ward save has been untied from here, added to demonic, not demonic instability, to Reign of Chaos. I talked about that earlier in the video. I'm not going to talk about why I don't think that's good now. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, go back. I've timestamped it. And also the removal of immune psychology. If you want to hear me talk about why I don't think that should be a thing, go back to the start of the video. We're just going to talk about these as they are and evaluate them here. So, demonic psychology. You auto-pass fear and terror. You already cause fear on here anyway, but you can still fear things that cause terror, so that does make sense to have in there. Terror tests, it doesn't matter. Like, having it written for completeness is fine, just for ease of understanding, but it doesn't actually need to say terror there. When they'd be normally required to make a panic test, a break test, or choose to flee, they must instead test for demonic instability before it gives ground, falls back in good order, or flees. So, basically, this is now giving you the ability to flee, but it's not on all gods because that is marked in specifically the demons each mark. So they always fall back in good order instead of ever having the possibility of fleeing and being caught. They just for go back and then auto rally. And stuff. Okay, so then it's broken down here. Demons can't flee and also automatically pass panic. So they're basically immune psychology here. Demons and Nurgle, they have to test for panic, but they can't choose to flee. Demons of Slaanesh automatically pass any panic tests, but they can flee. And then Tzeentch must test for panic, but they can always choose to fail without rolling for demonic instability. And then they may choose to flee. This, even within this rule existing the way that it does, I don't think this should, this shouldn't exist. The whole point of demonic instability being applied to the ability to flee is as the balancing, because you can never get caught by a charge. Therefore, this shouldn't exist in terms of taking away that limiting factor. Giving them the ability to flee is already very strong. Demonic instability has been tweaked. I don't like how this rule works, and I don't like how it's worked for previous editions either. So this is, again, not necessarily a criticism of this document, it's a criticism of demonic instability in general. I went back and had a look at the previous versions. In 6th and 8th, it was very punishing. If you roll a 12, a double 6 on your break test, or demonic instability whenever you have to take that, if you roll a double 6, that's 1 in 36, the entire unit would just disappear. There was no additional, to it. It was just, oh, too bad, so sad, rolled a double 6, you're gone. That sucks. I don't really like that. I know it's thematic and it's the way that the game is played. I do quite like the way that Val has tweaked it here. I think this is good. I think this is still punishing, but it's less punishing. Honestly, I'd rather just get away with it. But it is something that's been tied to the faction for a long time. So, if you want to keep that, you want to keep it. What I don't like is this reality blinks. And again, this is less good than the previous version. One of the previous editions had any wounds recover. Oh, no, sorry, I've reread it. I thought at some point he said 50%. I don't think this should exist in the way that it does. If you roll a double 1, obviously, normally, the way that a double 1 works for a leadership test, or a break test, I should say, is that you just, you hang on desperately. You don't disappear into the ether. You don't run away, you don't get caught. If you're double outnumbered, it doesn't matter. Just undoing all of the wounds on a 1 in 36 chance, I think it just sucks. I'm not opposed to, you don't lose any wounds, even if you'd have lost them on the combat res, and then you heal like D3 or D6 wounds back. But I think this is far too strong. It's just, oh, I rolled a double 1, man. Shucks, I guess it's a shame that you charged me and you did however much damage. You've positioned for 3 turns. You've got your big hefty cavalry unit to charge my infantry unit. You've killed half the unit. You're then stuck in. but it's okay because you'll probably be able to grind through them. Never mind, we're back to full. I think this is a real feels bad. I do not like it at all. I would much rather see that it was just D3 wounds returned or something like that. Like, yeah. I understand that this is, I think, a copy-paste from a previous edition, if I remember correctly. I couldn't remember which one it is. In fact, I've still got them all open. Let's just double-check. Which one is it? Instability. 8th edition here. Yeah, I don't think this is good. I think this sucks to play against. But yeah, anyway. Again, not really a criticism of how Val's put it. I like this version. I just think this in general is not something that should exist. Other than that, it's just talking about how it works. So basically, for every point of combat you lose by after you've taken the leadership test, add combat res to the number you roll on the dice for each number. You know, for how much it's above your leadership, you take wounds. Boom, there we go. Yeah, and then you give ground, which is obviously very strong. And given that the argument against, I shouldn't talk about this too much. One of the arguments against demonic psychology is that things, you know, falling back in good order and stuff is a benefit. If they're going to be able to do all of the stuff over here, then why are they also able to just give ground and stay locked in combat forever? Anyway, I'm not going to harp on that too much. I feel like there is just inconsistency in the argument there. Demonic Locus. The friendly demonic units within the BSB's range can reroll demonic instability tests. So basically, it's the same as being able to reroll break tests. However, they may never reroll a banished result. Honestly, I'd be okay with them rerolling the banished result. I think that'd be fine, but sure, is what it is. I think also, if he's keeping the ability to, you know, have panic tests in here, should probably also still be able to reroll panic tests. Something that's missing from the BSB upgrade there. Demonic Charge. This is just updating the rule, I believe. So I think Demonic Charge, if I remember correctly, is just on the Bloodthirster or something like that. And it says, you know, impact hits are AP2. And this is just changing it so it's more granular. So you can say this model has AP1 impact hits, this one has AP2 impact hits. I think this is a good rule. I like this. In terms of other upgrades, Infernal Favor and Cleaving Blow are still the same. Singular Essence. This is, I believe, on all of the gods, the greater demons, sorry, I should say. They have auto-passing panic tests that they're required to make. Sure. I've talked about my thoughts on the psychology. Reign of Chaos, 1 through 6 on start of turn subphase. Again, talked about this previously. The way that it works is if you roll a 2 through 5, and also before you get to roll, so if you go second, you just default to Eye of the Storm. You start off with a 5-up ward save against any wound suffered, and you can take regen saves against magical attacks despite having the Warp Spawned rule. That might be too good in terms of, you know, the balancing of there are quite a few regen saves across the board in there. I don't really have too strong thoughts on it. I'd have to see that on the table in terms of whether this is too much, but being able to take down here, where if you roll a 6, you get the 5-up 4-up ward against non-magical attacks, and you get to take regens as well. That double whammy is definitely too much in terms of durability. So you start off, the normal result, the 2 through 5, and the starter game is you have a 5-up ward save, and you can make regen saves all of the time against magical attacks. On a 1, you have a ward save against non-magical attacks only. You can't take regens against magical attacks because of Warp Spawned, and if you have to take a demonic instability test, you banish it on 11 or 12, which is, it's not twice as likely, it's 3 times as likely. It's very punishing. And then Chaotic Surge, you've got a 4-up ward against non-magical attacks, a 5-up ward all of the time. You can always take regens against magical attacks, and then Reality Blinks happens on not just a 2, it happens on a 2 or a 3, which again is not just twice as likely, it's 3 times as likely. After that, we've got a flavor rule, which is rival alignment. Again, I quite like the idea of having all of the gods on the table together. Previous editions have had this be harder to do. In some, like 5th edition particularly, had, I think it was called Demonic Amnosity, where, you know, you had a pretty reasonable chance of 2 units within 12 inches of each other that were different alignments just fighting. So this is not the most harsh version of it. Khorne and Slaanesh, a rival, Nurgle and Tzeentch, a rival, and they have hatred each other, which is updated from being just the demons of, but also mark of. So this means that if you've got a Slaanesh army and you're playing against someone who's got Khorne Warriors of Chaos, you have hatred for them as well, which is nice. And rival alignments are never considered friendly models for the purpose of casting spells, the Inspiring Presence special rule, or any Demonic Locus special rules. But they are still for... oh no, that's fair. Demonic Locus is the name of the BSB rule. Okay, so basically no BSB effect, no Inspiring Presence, which is your general effect, and you can't cast spells on them, which I think is fine. It's probably the least punishing way of doing that, I think. On to the marks. Demons of Khorne are now upgraded to have the Furious Charge special rule, and if it charged, you get +1 strength. Obviously, I talked about how I feel about how Khorne should be. That doesn't really line up with what Games Workshop have said, so, you know, that's fine. That is what it is. This is a way to give them some more oomph. Just something that you need to remember is impact hits are specifically unmodified strength. So the +1 you get for charging does not improve the impact hit because it is a modifier to your strength. Demons of Nurgle, just keeping it exactly the same, having the rerolls to hit against them in combat of a 6 have to be rerolled. Demons of Slaanesh are -1 to hit in the shooting phase for ballistic skill shooting, which I don't think I'm particularly worried about ballistic skill shooting in general. It'd be, for Slaanesh, it'd be mostly magic missiles. Yeah, anyway. And also they get the +1 modifier to their charge pursuit is now updated to be flee as well, and they increase their charge range. Yeah, it's, I don't know, having them be, thematically I think this makes sense in terms of they are fast and thus they're harder to hit, but I'm not sure that it is an angle that I'd double down on. I feel like I'd just double down on making them better at the things that they're good at and not worry too heavily about the fact that they're glass cannon. And then demons, they have +1 to any casting roll they have. This is a very strong rule for a lot of stuff, especially with some of the updates in this book. Moving on to the magic items, and by that I mean demonic gift and icons, we've got some updates here. Aether Blade is down to 50 points. Honestly, I think this is fine. Turning off armor saves is nice, but the things that you're going to put it on probably have, you know, if you're putting it on a greater demon, you've got at least AP2 kind of across the board anyway, and it's specifically for the hand weapon, as this was updated by Games Workshop, one of the only updates they've made to the legacy factions. So yeah, 50 points here feels pretty fine. I don't have any issues with that. Winged Horror, 50 points, and it's been upgraded to be any infantry only. So it's not just regular infantry. Previously, this meant that the Khorne Herald couldn't join the... couldn't take the upgrade because it's heavy infantry. This is now updated. That's fine. How many points was it before? Just double-checked. It used to be 45 points. Now it's 50. I don't think it needed to go up at all in points. I don't think it's more valuable because you can put it on the Khorne Herald. It is in a way, but also I think that's just an oversight on Games Workshop's part, that they probably didn't intend for the Khorne one to not be able to fly. Because if we're being realistic, that's the one that I would want to put it on most. Maybe actually on the Tzeentch Herald, just in terms of having a mobile spellcaster. But anyway, yeah, I don't think this needs to go up in points. I think this can revert to 45 very comfortably. I feel like that's a little bit of a nerf for them that they didn't need. Many Arms, 30 points. 0 to 2 per model, gets +1 to their attack characteristic. I think that's fine. I think, you know, being able to pay 60 points for +2 attacks is a pretty good rate as far as we've seen for Games Workshop. But also, you don't have ridden monsters. So if I'm taking something like Many Arms for Warriors of Chaos, that obviously costs more. But then you can buy magic items that are kind of arguably better. Although this falls apart when I'm talking about the Bloodthirster. And it costs more for a Chaos Lord, but then the Chaos Lord could be riding a dragon and have layered saves and more wounds. So I think 30 points here, sure, that feels absolutely fine. I'm not opposed to it. Something I am opposed to, and I don't think this is a balancing issue, this is just, I don't love that this is a rule that can be spammed for any faction. Granic Tome, 20 points, 0 to 1 per wizard. They know one more spell than is normal for their level of wizardry. This is the standard way of doing it, and honestly, you're kind of overpaying. It's normally 15 points, but I just feel like, do we need to give cast? Oh, I've got the hiccups. Sorry. Do we need to give the armies, like all factions, all gods, the ability to spam wizards and take lots and lots of plus to cast, like, you know, have loads of wizards that can have more spells? I don't think it's a problem. It's just I don't like it. I feel like it's not something that's healthy for the game. I actually don't think it's necessarily a problem here for the list. It's just I personally, that doesn't jive with me. So yeah, this is fine thematically. It's just I don't like how it works. Chaotic icons, Exalted Locust. This has been updated. This is a fairly important one. We'll get to the locuses. I have thoughts on these as well. But basically what it does is, instead of the previous, it now extends the locus rule that each herald has, which is a specific buff for the unit they've joined. And instead of it just being the unit they've joined, it becomes all friendly units in command range of the same demonic alignment. This is very strong, I think. One to keep in mind. Banner of Unholy Victory, coming down in points, down to 50 points for plus D3 combat res. I think that's good. 25 points for a war banner, 50 points for an average of +2. Honestly, you could maybe make it cheaper, but this is in line with like the Jade banner that you see in other places, so I think that's absolutely fine. Finally, we've got the Standard of Chaotic Glory, which has been rewritten the way that it was before. It used to be +1 leadership to models in command range, and now it is models in the unit gets +1 to their leadership characteristic. I think this is fine. It's a cheap banner. It does a thing. Honestly, maybe I'd be tempted to just change it to War Banner and be like, you've got +1 combat res. I know it's a little bit boring to just take the common magic items and copy and paste them across, but I feel like when you've got a system that restricts you from having the access to the basic things that are very good, kind of just reprinting them is worth doing, and we will see that because there is, at least one of the banners is a copy paste from something is very good. So we'll get to that one in a little bit. But yeah, I think this is fine. I don't hate it. 15 points for +1 leadership per unit. Sure. I'd rather just have +1 combat res, I think, which has a similar effect in some ways. Moving on to Khorne. I actually would like Skull Totem to be for any faction. I think this is something that would work well for Slaanesh specifically, with the way that Slaanesh is looking within the document. So I think it's a little bit of a shame to have it like so. But if you need, you need to replace the, plus Furious Charge banner that has no longer got a place because Khorne has Furious Charge, I think that's fine. So yeah, this is just Totem of Wrath, 50 points, improve your AP, and reroll 1s to wound in combat. Great stuff. Love that. Icon of Endless War. Why has that changed? Oh, they've just changed the wording because very poor copy editing on Games Workshop part. Good job. Good job. Like to see a little update there. Although I will say, on the front page here, and I shouldn't, this is completely unimportant, so apologies for pointing this out. This Demons of Chaos list is completely unplayable. You literally cannot use it because this document allows you to play a Skaven army. So, unfortunately, Demons of Chaos, completely unplayable. Gonna have to go back to the draft there. Okay, back to items. Spell Eater, you dispel as if you're a level 3 wizard. What was it saying before? Level 2 wizard. Yep, I think this is good. For 50 points, getting +2 to your dispel is solid. Honestly, maybe still too expensive. I think it's good. I think it's worth taking. Being able to dispel as if you're a level, dispelling at +2, sure. I'd pay 50 points for it, but I'd want it to be a little bit cheaper. Armor of Khorne gives you a 3-up armor save that can't be reduced in any way. 25 points here, I think that's fine. Obviously, you're comparing it to the 40 points armor that you can get in the common magic items. Armor for specific factions should be better than the common versions, and honestly, given that you've already got decent armor, or like half-decent armor for Khorne anyway, getting a 3-up armor save is, I don't think, bad. Armor's been improved for Khorne, kind of across the board in this document. So, yeah, I think 25 points for a 3-up save that can't be improved. I think it's pretty okay. Axe of Khorne, 25 points, and it is AP2 instead of AP1. Cool. That's good. I think I'd pay for that. A +1 strength, AP -2 killing blow weapon. That feels like something that I would field for Khorne. I almost would rather see 8 strength +2, but, then we're talking about magic weapons. and magic weapons, cheap magic weapons are not good. So I think 25 points for this feels very, very solid, but not in a way that I think is a problem. Collar of Khorne hasn't changed, but it's important to note that now you can put this on more units. For 25 points, this is just very, very solid. You can improve magic resist by 1. This is good. I'm expecting to, if you're playing a lot of Khorne, I'm expecting to see this in a lot of places, especially in the meta that we're in. Moving on to Nurgle. Nurgle's pretty untouched. There's not a huge amount changed here. Trappings of Nurgle for 25 points gives you a 4-up armor save, and you can take it if you're a wizard, which is an important thing to know here, because you kind of just want all of your stuff to be wizards, right? I think, generally. So that's a good upgrade there. How much did it used to cost? Trappings of Nurgle, 35. Sure, down to 25. Why not? Icon of Nurgle. The Icon of Eternal Virulence is looking at being changed. I think this is one of the most dull upgrades that you can buy. I don't think it's thematically fun, and also poison has been nerfed since it was written, so having this highlighted as something to be changed I think makes a lot of sense. Maybe this is, obviously I've made my case for some, Nurgle being the faction of debuffing. Maybe there is scope for it to be a banner that does some debuffing. I don't know what that would be, but I could see that. And then Rotten Icon, 15 points. You can't get bonus combat for being engaged in the flank or rear of a unit carrying the Rotten Icon. Sure, which is basically the same here. It's just updated the wording in the rear arc, and it's the flank and rear. Sure, it should have been both anyway. I don't really understand. I guess the idea thematically is that you're dragging, you're leaving a trail of slime and awful stuff, so you don't get the bonus there. But yeah, cool. 15 points. That seems reasonable. It's still not one that I'm jazzed to take, but I will think about taking it. Slaanesh. This is a good update on Infernal Enraptress. It was pretty pricey already, so it's a Demonic Herald. It previously was infantry only, and the reason for that is there is a model that, correlates with this buff, the Infernal Enraptress model. So, while in their command range, friendly demons of Slaanesh that are also wizards apply +1 to the casting roll they make, and enemies are -1 to their casting roll. This is a good buff for 50 points. This is worth taking, and now it applies to the wizard that has it as well, which is important, because they are in range of themselves. This is super reasonable changes, and this is something that I would definitely consider taking. It's a little bit of layering synergy. The problem is you can only get to level 2, and you can't have spell consistency with Slaanesh. That's one of the big issues that I have with trying to make them work in terms of output. You can take Demonology, but you can't take a Lore Familiar to guarantee you get, Demonic Vessel. So, yeah, anyway, good change here. I like it. Still 50 points. Feels pretty good, I think. Even though it's a double whammy, I still think this is probably fine. Ah, yes, here we go. This is the one that absolutely needs to be changed. This should not exist. So it's a once per game, and the way it works is at the start of your opponent's declare charges and charge reaction subphase, you pick a single unit within 6 inches of this model that is able to declare a charge against it, and previously they had to take a leadership test, which made it bad, but now it's just they must declare a charge against the model or its unit. Why is this a problem? Because you just take a really cheap model, and you run it up the board, and you put it in front of your opponent's unit, and you make them charge, and you pull their Death Star out of the way. This is before shooting. Your opponent has no way of interacting with this, other than, man, I hope you can't get to me. Because it's not infantry, you can put it on a 9-inch move steed, and it's relatively cheap to do. Being able to pull your opponent's Death Star out of position, and then you can go in and charge on your next turn, is absolutely backbreaking. Obviously, you just flee as well, so you do it on something with a high charge move, and you can pull them to a ridiculous spot. This shouldn't exist in its form. There are rules that make your opponents do things that they don't want to do, and that has a little bit of feels bad to it, which is why you layer lots of, you've got to pass the test or whatever. If this was even a spell, to happen, I could see it, but there is no rolling required. There is no interaction on your opponent's part. It's just, okay, you have to do this thing. So this shouldn't exist in the way that it does. It needs to be changed. Enrapturing Gaze, enemy units engaged in combat with this model cannot use the Inspiring Presence special rule of the general. This is just, it needed to... The way that it was written before, it didn't work. What do you mean enemy models engaged in combat can't use the Inspiring Presence? What about the models in the unit that weren't in base-to-base contact with this model? So, good change. I like it. Yeah, Sub-Prefect Musk, still just good, by the way. Still a very decent thing to have there. I need to, you know what? I need to remind myself. What's the initiative of Slaanesh? Because maybe that's something that initiative 5, cool. So you can make your opponent strikes last, which means that if they're charging you in the front, you're going to be able to hit them before they get to hit you. I don't think that's going to make much difference, given how anemic, demonettes are, but it's nice to have anyway. Just something that's worth considering and pointing out, given that this is extremely common. You can take it in multiple places. Icons of Slaanesh. Banner of Acquiescence has gone down in points. It's now minus D3 to weapon skill and initiative. This is pretty strong, honestly. It's an offensive and defensive buff. Because you are, like, decent weapon skill, you're not high weapon skill. But if you can drop your opponent to weapon skill 3, you're going to be hitting them more consistently. It's just nice to have. Icon of the Eternal Dance. Speaking of things that exist that are good to just be reprinted, again, I'd kind of be tempted just to put this in, available for all Slaanesh, all Demons units. I feel like having just the very good stuff tied to one god is a little bit of a feels bad, but, it is what it is. This is the Monster Hunter Tapestry, so 25 points, you can't stop me. We know it's good, so good to see. And then Siren Standard, just making it a little bit cheaper. If you wish to charge the unit, if the enemy unit that you're charging wishes to flee, they have to take a leadership test, and if they fail, they must hold. This is what I'm talking about in terms of taking away agency from your opponent. It's coming with a test. Honestly, a leadership test sucks. Like, there's no such thing as a bad leadership in the game right now, realistically. There's the units that matter either have Warband Horde or have, like, just good leadership or have a general with good leadership. So it kind of sucks for things to be tied to leadership, but this is too much. So somewhere between here and here would be ideal. I don't know what the answer is. Moving on to the Gifts of Tzeentch. Will of Tzeentch dropping from 55 points to 35 points. That's kind of nuts. Will of Tzeentch is unbelievably strong. So the way that it works is once per round, you can reroll a single d6 of any dice that you roll for the model. That is wild, because it can be part of a batch as well. Just the consistency you get out of that is very, very good. I don't know that 55 points is where it needed to be, but 35 feels very cheap. That's a very, very strong ability. And it's one of those that's not necessarily... And I don't know if it appears that strong. It's very good. It's a really, really strong rule to have. I think this might have been nerfed, like points dropped too much. I don't want to sit here and be like, demons shouldn't get strong stuff. Demons were in a very bad spot. So if they've got stuff that's maybe a little overpowered, and the whole faction doesn't get that across the board, it's probably not too bad. But yeah, this is something that's a very strong buff. Twin Heads. This has changed from the model knows more than one spell more, like the spell familiar that it used to be. And now it's a Lord of Change only. This model knows spells from 2 Lords of Magic rather than the usual 1, and you can then discard 1 spell as normal, replacing it with a signature spell from either Lore of Magic or with a single Lore of Demons spell from the Lore of Demons. This is a problem combined with the Lord of Change. You know what? Let's just talk about that now. If I scroll down to the Lord of Change, and the reason that this is a problem is because the Lord of Change has... We'll look at their actual profile in a sec, like later on. Master of Sorcery. They do not randomly generate their spells. Instead, they may choose which spells they know from their chosen lore, and then they can also take one of the, Demons of Tzeentch spells or the signature spell. That's really, really strong. Like, a Lord of Change is already a pretty damn good caster, because you start at a level 3 wizard, which is fine, and you've got the ability to get, +1 spell known through just the general lore, so you can get consistency there. But then being able to combo it with you just pick spells from the lores and Twin Heads, you can know spells from 2 lores, that is far too good, because you have an actual good caster, an actual good model that can pull from 2 good lores. People have said, but Ogdras can do this, and it's not a problem. Ogdras is not a good model in terms of, like, it doesn't run around and do stuff on its own, and it's not pulling from good lores. Troll lore is kind of whatever. The best thing you can do with Ogdras, if you're not playing Troll Horde, realistically, is give a unit a 5-up save and a 5-up ward. A 5-up region and a 5-up ward. That's kind of cool, but it's not, what you can do with a Lord of Change. You can go with, the Lord of Change, you can go for Battle Magic and Illusion, probably the ways that you want to go. You can go for Arcane Urgency, you can go for Spectral Doppelganger, you can go for Glittering Robes, and then you don't even have to go for a fourth spell. Those are just really, really good. If you wanted to, you could also then just be like, oh, I'm just going to take a Magic Missile. Or you could go, let's take multiple Magic Missiles. Yeah, it's too much. The combination should not exist in the way that it does. So one of those rules has to go away. I'm not opposed to being able to take spells from two laws, which is generally just not good, but being able to take spells from two laws and pick the spells you know is too much, especially on what was already probably the best combat character in the book, which is wild to say because it's the wizard, but it's like the most consistent. It's the most consistent Spectral Doppelganger character because you've got Will of Tzeentch, you've got a great weapon that you're running around with. You can either Will of Tzeentch, you're casting Spectral Doppelganger at +3. If you roll poorly on one of the dice, you can re-roll one of the dice. Or, if you think the spell's going to go off, you don't have to bother. You can then, on top of that, roll your number of hits. Oh, too bad, I rolled a 1 and a 6. Let's re-roll that 1. The consistency that you're getting on the Spectral Doppelganger, if you can use that re-roll for it, is very, very good. Now that it's cheaper, now that you've got twin heads as well, there's too much layered on top of that. Also, Iridescent Corona. This is a good change, by the way, but you can make this model -2 to be shot. Not that you care necessarily on a lot of change. You're not super worried about ballistic skill shooting. But yeah, there's too much to be layered on there. Iridescent Corona, good change like this one. 30 points still. Any enemy model that targets this model or a unit it has joined is -1 to hit. So this lets you put a defensive buff on like a herald in a unit. More importantly, if you take this upgrade on a unit of flamers, the wizard inside a unit of flamers, the unit is -1 to be shot, and that is meaningful because they are pretty squishy. So being able to give them a defensive buff like that is really nice, and it's something that I've wanted to do previously and then been very sad when I realized that it applied to models, not units. Icons of Tzeentch, Banner of Discord. They get MR3 and units within range get MR1. How much are they paying for that? 60 down to 30. Like, honestly, I don't know. It probably doesn't want to go cheaper. 50 points is fine for this. This is okay. Although, again, just going back to the previous discussion of the table where you get a better save against non-magical attacks, should we also be allowing them to have access to Magic Resist 3 and, the ability to shut down enemy casting at the same time? Probably not. Icon of Sorcery, 20 points, pink horrors only. This is different to how it was before. Instead of doubling the power level of the spell that you're casting, when you're casting from the Lore of Demons, the strength of pink fire is increased by 1, and the AP is increased by 1 for each point of rank bonus. And you go up to rank bonus of 2. And in terms of casting, just to very quickly touch on how this unit works, when you're casting with Pink Horrors, you cast as power level 1 if you've got a unit champion, power level 2 if you've got a unit champion and a wizard, and then otherwise it's power level 0. It previously was to do with your rank bonus. Now it's just more standardized with the things that we see in the core game, talking about, Darkfire Warlocks. Talking about Sisters of the Thorn. There we go. Too many sisters in this game. And they do 2 different things. Sisters of Avalon and Sisters of the Thorn need to team up, and also Wood Elves and High Elves need to team up. That's not important for this review, but let me just do like a mixed combined army. Anyway, back to the review. Moving on to the Lore of Demons, the main thing that we're seeing here, this is from like a year ago when Vortex spells were just changed with, Pillar of Fire, ruining the meta. Blue Fire of Tzeentch has been added to the list of spells you're able to have. I've kind of gone back and forwards on this, but I think I've landed on this as probably a problem. I think it's a problem because it's a better magic missile than you can cast generally. Obviously, Tzeentch can spam out casters to a pretty ridiculous degree, and the casters that are able to take it can take a slightly better version of the summoning, which is same range, same casting value, 2d6 hits instead of 2d6 plus 3, which is close enough that it makes no difference in terms of, hits. It's just this is slightly more consistent, but it's AP2 instead of AP1. And then flaming attacks, which is often a downside. But Blue Fire is a better magic missile. The problem with having this as a signature spell is it's a signature spell that's agnostic to the lore of magic that the caster's taking. So if you're trying to spam magic missiles, you could theoretically take lots of battle magic casters, roll for fireball, and then have double the amount of magic missiles you previously had. And also then you've got access to other things in battle magic, such as Arcane Urgency, which can play with the sort of mobile shooting playstyle. Even though it's a 9, your level 1 wizards are casting it at +2, so you're casting it on a 7, and your level 3 wizards are casting it on 6 on the dice. I think it probably shouldn't be transplanted into this book. In terms of, like, is it too strong power level-wise? It's hard to say. I've seen a lot of people talking about how Tzeentch seems to be the best version of what you can do. I think it's just, it doesn't add... It makes the game worse, I think, than being able to do this. We've already got issues with, you know, one magic missile spamming faction. I don't know that we need another one that... The problem with... I've said this previously, the problem with shooting is it's kind of like, it's all or nothing. Either you're good enough to kill your opponent before they get to you, or they don't. Or in this case, it's going to be more like mobile shooting. So it's, because shooting is so binary, it can feel rough. If it's something that's spammable, if you're like, hey, specifically the Lord of Change can take this because it feels weird, he doesn't have a good magic missile, sure. But being able to have this repeatedly, I think, is where there is a problem. Gift of Mutation, just change the casting value to make it more in line with the general casting of the game. Honestly, +11 for the 2 debuffs is maybe too high. This could probably be -8, -10, but I don't have a strong opinion on it. It's like a very good buff. You can debuff weapon skill, strength, and toughness, and if you get the cast on 11+, it gets 2 things, but it's also only a 12-inch range, and it's a hex, so a lot of people are running magic resist. I don't know. I'd be okay with this going down, but I don't think it needs to change. Finally, we'll see the changes to the generic items. Plague Sword, AP1. Sure, that's fine. And then Lamprey's Bite as well. Multiple wounds, D3 against everything, not just monsters. I think this is fine. I guess it makes them pretty compelling character hunters. If you can get 2 models in base-to-base with a wizard, maybe you've got a decent chance of getting them. I don't have any strong thoughts on that. And then Warp Flame as well, D3 plus 1 shots. What was it previously? It was just previously D3 shots, wasn't it, on Warp Flame for multiple shots? It'll be on the actual unit itself because reasons. Burning Chariot has Warp Flame. Yeah, D3. Now it's D3 plus 1. I think that's absolutely fine. I'm okay with that entirely. One of the worst feelings in the game is you've got multiple shots and then you roll a 1 and you still take the penalty for shooting multiple shots because it's how it works, but you only shoot a single shot. That sucks. D3 plus 1, I'm alright with that. Moving on to the actual units. So, quick little point. This is not really the scope of, the Renegades document to do. I wish that these base sizes would be updated. In the way that people say that dragons should all be on 100 by 150 mils, I think the greater demons should go onto bigger bases. I understand there is an aspect of old collections and old models, but I feel like the power of these characters shouldn't be on such a small base. It doesn't really matter too much. That's something I'd like to see updated in the future. That feels more like a subsequent edition thing as opposed to something that I'd expect to see from this document, but I do wish they were on slightly larger bases. Bloodthirster. It's been about 9 days since I watched the video. I watched it when it came out, where they talked about the choices. I seem to remember Val being pretty concerned that maybe the Bloodthirster was too killy now, if I remember correctly. I don't think any of the changes he's made are particularly unreasonable here. So previously, if we go back up to the Bloodthirster, it came with the axe as default. It didn't come with anything as default, that's it, but it was 355 points. Now you start off with the lash, which is kind of dog, Do I want my 350 odd point character to be running around at only strength 6 AP2 with an extra attack plus 1 when I could do something else? I don't think so. I'm going to be paying extra for it. Blood Flail has gone down in points. I think that's fine. I still think Blood Flail is probably the better of the weapons, but yeah, this has been brought in line with general flail changes. So strength plus 2, AP minus 2, armor bane 1, multiple wounds D3. This thing absolutely slaps. You strength 9 on the charge because of the Demon of Khorne plus strength on the charge buff. you hit real damn hard. So that's pretty good there. It's got Killing Blow. It always had Monster Slayer. It now has Killing Blow. Honestly, oh, sorry. No, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's multiple wounds. That's fine. This is good. The Great Axe. This is one that I think Val was concerned about, if I remember correctly. It's got Killing Blow instead of just having Monster Slayer. If a Bloodthirster is toe-to-toe with an infantry character and is struggling to kill it, that kind of sucks. Like, I'm not opposed to having it, giving it have Killing Blow, I guess it kind of sucks for, like, Doombulls and stuff like that, multiple wound monstrous infantry, but I think for the general play experience, giving it Killing Blow feels absolutely fine, and you're giving up multiple wounds. So yeah, I'm super on board with this. This feels entirely fine with me. And then other than that, no Furious Charge, because that's built into Mark of Khorne, so it's still there. Has Close Order, which is just a clarification from previous lack of rules from Games Workshop, and then the impact hits are up to D3+1. This just feels fine. I think it's all right. Full plate as well. It's got a 4-up save and a 5-up ward. Yeah. I'm not, it's still a pretty okay mid-cost combat character that's kind of squishy. 4-up save, 5-up ward is not awful. It's not awful at all. But you're also only T6 and 6 wounds, so cannons will take this thing apart still pretty comprehensively. And yeah, I think it's solid. I like where it is. I wouldn't want to necessarily buff it too much further before I see it on the table, but this feels absolutely fine to me. The Herald of Khorne is now tankier. It's got Brazen Scales, which count as heavy armor instead of the light armor it had previously. Furious. I'm not going to keep pointing it out. This has been baked into the Mark of Khorne. Then it's got MR2 instead of MR1, and Locus of Wrath, which is the unit, their mount, the Herald itself, all gain hatred all enemies. And remember, if you take the BSB upgrade, you can give a bubble of hatred all enemies. I wonder if that's too good, because having that follow around the Bloodthirster to unlock hatred all enemies while on a Juggernaut as well, it's pretty good. It probably isn't. It's probably fine. If we're comparing it to, like, is it as good as a Bretonnian Lord with the hatred all enemies? It's easier to pull that off, so I don't know. It's very direct power, though, so hard to argue with. And still only 3 attacks, but that's fine. You've got 4 on the charge. That feels pretty decent for the Demonic Herald in general. Hold on, if I just double check, there wasn't a tweak for the Hellblade. Yeah, I still think the Hellblade's kind of just pants. I feel like the Hellblade should be better than it is. Strength user AP1 cleaving blow is incredibly meh. Anyway, Juggernaut of Khorne, weapon skill 4 needs to be changed, apparently. It would make sense for it to be higher weapon skill, but I think 4 is high for mount, so I'm not upset about that. It can now benefit from the Mark of Khorne. It has Furious Charge as well, because it is a demon, and it has Demonic Charge, AP -2 on its impact hits. Great. This looks fine. I think Blood Crushers now feel like they're in a pretty solid spot, so having a character on a Blood Crusher is nice. And given that you've got Barding on there as well as the Armored Hide one, so you're getting up to a 3-up save for the Herald on top of there. I think that just puts them in a pretty solid spot. And also they're making their Strength 5 attacks at AP2 with 3 attacks on the charge. Again, I kind of rather wouldn't have them, I'd rather they didn't have Furious Charge and they just had 3 attacks, but it's whatever. I'm not here to quibble that every time I see a unit. Bloodletters, down to 13 points. They have heavy armor instead of light armor. The unit champion can have a demonic gift up to 25 points, so probably just windmill slam, magic resist, +1 on this unit, getting them up to magic resist 2, and things are cheaper here. Fine. They're still infantry. They still don't hit super hard. They have Furious Charge now, which is cool, but just, they're move 5 infantry, and you don't have easy access to get them around the battlefield. So I think they still kind of suck, honestly, which is a shame, but I think they're in line with what they should be, as opposed to, the issues are like systemic infantry issues as opposed to anything else, I would say. Fleshhounds of Khorne, 30 points now. They keep getting cheaper. Demonic Talons and Brazen Scales. They've got heavy armor built in, plus armor Bane 1. They've got heavy armor built in, so they've got a 5-up save and a 5-up ward. There are 4. You can take them in units of 4. Val was talking about the weirdness of heavy cavalry, being able to take them, not being able to take them in 4s, even though that's how wide they rank up, which I think is fair. Obviously, they've got Swift Stride previously. They're just pretty decent on there. Where's the rule for Demonic Talons? Because that gives you actual AP, but I think that's new, right? If I just go up here, did I miss them? Demonic Talons are AP 1. I don't think that existed. They didn't have Demonic Talons before, right? I'm certain that they always used to just be... yeah, it's not... He's not coloured it correctly. Demonic Talons are a new thing, as far as I can tell, unless he's moved them from somewhere else. Anyway, Flesh Hands now have AP 1 on their attacks, which is a pretty nice upgrade to have, because they are, strength and toughness 4. They've got 2 attacks each, which is nice. But previously, they only had AP 0. Now they're AP 0 and Armor Bane 1. Now they're AP 1 and Armor Bane 1 as well, which puts them in a pretty okay spot, I think. 2 wounds, T5, 5 up save, 5 up ward. They're relatively beefy. They're relatively fast. They hit an okay amount. I think they've got a place now, which is nice to have. Also, you can give them ambushes, which is just a real pain for your opponent to deal with. It does make them pretty pricey. If you're going a unit of 4 with ambushes, that's what, 120, 132 points? 136 points. No, 132 was right. I got it right the first time. Yeah, it's not a cheap unit of ambushes, but yeah, you can come in the back line there. Blood Crushers, again, just going up to a 4-up save here, I think it is. Brazen Scales, Barding. No, it's a 3-up save, sorry. So, yeah. This unit with a 3-up save is actually kind of chunky. The T4, 3 wounds, 3-up armor save, 5-up ward. That's more beefy than any other monstrous cavalry in the game that I can think of. Obviously, Dragon Ogres have 4 wounds, but having that built-in ward save is pretty damn nice. I don't know that I particularly want them to be beefy. I feel like I want them to hit harder, but not be, like, super, super durable. I don't think it's a problem, but it is a little bit of a weird ground that they're at. I think maybe they should be cheaper and not as tanky as they are. Obviously, there is, people make the argument that you shouldn't just make things cheaper to make them better, which I do agree with in general. But I think this is in a unit that maybe doesn't need to be like made more durable. You've already got a lot of good stuff on there. You've got impact hits with AP. You've got a good amount of attacks on the charge specifically. You can give them magic resist. Maybe they don't need to be 65 points. Maybe we don't give them a 3-up save. We leave them a 4-up save, but they get cheaper. Yeah. Anyway, that's more to do with how I feel the gods should be delineated between as opposed to anything else. So we'll move on from there. But yeah, they seem fine. I think these were playable-ish before. I think they're playable now. Should be okay. It's just not... The problem is, the game is not kind to monstrous cavalry. Like, what's your game plan if someone just parts a dragon in front of you? Or, a Shigangan Lord. I guess Spectral Doppelganger is not great, but Monkey King's Wisdom will still do a number on you, which is a bit of a problem. Blood Throne of Khorne. This is the chariot specifically for the character. It is 130 points, and it is a mount only, I believe. Is that correct? It doesn't say here. Yes, it's a mount only. I wasn't 100% sure of that, because I think I've literally never seen one. It's got better in terms of a 3-up armor save. How many points was it before? I'm pretty sure it was probably something stupid, like 160. So let's see how much it's dropped down by. When I know where it started, I can assess whether I think it'll see play. Oh, hey, it was 160, as I say. So it's dropped 30 points, and it's gone up +1 armor save. Maybe. First charge is nice. Impact hits is decent. Totem of Endless Bloodletting gives you reroll 1s to hit in combat, although you could just take the Herald that gives you reroll hits in general. And you could take the banner that gives that to everyone. So yeah, I think this is a little bit without a perfect place to live, but it does get you to 6 wounds, T5 with a 3-up save and a 5-up ward. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. It's just probably not great. Interesting, the Blood Throne itself will get plus attacks, which I don't know why I think is funny, but because of Furious Charge, it's going to go up to 4 attacks there. It's what it is. And then we've got the Skull Cannon of Khorne. Previously didn't have magic resist, which is weird because it's a Khorne unit and it really should do, because they all should have magic resist. Other than that, it's gained +1 armor save and gained a scatter shot. Previously, it just had the solid shot and the scatter shot, which is a breath weapon. We all know that breath weapons don't work, so this has just been changed to the normal this is what a cannon does for the it's not called scattershot, grape shot. So yeah, I think this is fine. The limitation, it can only shoot in the front arc, I think is good. And yeah, clarification for grape shot here as well. Honestly, with grape shot, they're kind of a little bit scary, I think, because if you get close to them, instead of, one of the things that you can do to beat chariots is to get close and not, deny them their impact hits, which is a bit of a pain for them. You can kind of just stand there and shoot them into some targets, which is interesting. Or, if you try and get out of the charge arc of it to set yourself up to charge them on a subsequent turn, they can just turn around and charge you, shoot you as well. So yeah, a little bit of an interesting upgrade there. I don't think it makes them too good, but it's just definitely a point of power on a unit that was already kind of pretty decent. The Great Unclean One. Movement going from 5 to 6. As I previously mentioned, I think that Nurgle should be slow but also tanky. However, movement 5 was a little bit egregious. So going up to movement 6 here is fine. Everyone else has at least fly like 9 or something. Fly 8, fly 9 for the other greater demons. So having this model be so slow was pretty rough, honestly. That is a change that I am on board with. A change that I think is odd is making it a default level 3 wizard and going up 30 points. This is effectively saving 30 points on the Great Unclean One, which is fine because it wasn't overplayed before. But I don't know thematically that it needs to be a wizard, like a high level wizard. I think having it level 1 and then being able to buff it up to a high level wizard made sense. I don't feel like it needed to default to being a level 3 wizard. I don't think it is a problem that it is, but it's just not something that I would have changed personally. It's got the immune to psychology, whatever rule. And then in terms of weapons, you can start off with just a hand weapon, which you're obviously not going to take, but then you can take an additional hand weapon to 6 points. Don't do this, it's terrible. Or you can take a bile sword or plague flail for 10 and 25 points respectively. The bile sword stays the same. It's strength 6, AP 2, armor bane 1, strikes last, turning off regen saves, which is okay for 10 points. If you don't want to juice this thing up too much, it's pretty solid. But then you've got the plague flail, which is basically an actual flail. I do like here, and this is, it's fine, it's a draft. This is a copy edit issue where you get strength, and the strength and armor bane only apply against enemy models that wield a charge this turn. It doesn't have armor bane, so maybe that needs to be added on. It's like a copy-paste error. But yeah, getting you up to strength 8, AP -3, multiple wounds D3 is pretty solid for a greater demon, and just in line with the sort of output that you might expect to see. I like this one over the Bale Sword for sure. It doesn't turn off regens, but if you're doing 2 wounds, then unless they have a 3-up regen save, this multiple wounds is going to be better. So just pay the extra 15 points, I think. Heavy infantry now. I think all of them have been changed to heavy infantry. I'd have to double check. That does have some implications. When we get to the end of the heralds, we'll maybe talk about that one. So a herald is a level 1 wizard, whereas before it was default not a wizard. This is something that has changed across all of the Nurgle and Slaanesh herald as well, I believe, and their points haven't gone up. Interesting. I don't know that they needed to be wizards, but in terms of like balancing them points wise instead of just making them cheaper, I don't hate it. Level 1 wizard, worst comes to worst, you just default to battle magic and take hammer hand. That's not awful. Maybe they could have just done with being cheaper, but I think they're fine. The other change is they have got Locus of Fecundity, and obviously we saw the aura of, or the, hatred enemy models for Khorne. This gives you the unit and the herald a 5-up regen. This is pretty good. And having a 12-inch bubble of this is a 5-up regen for everyone might be too good as well. Although it probably isn't. I'm actually not super worried about this, because where this works well is going for multiple units. I think the thing you can abuse this with is for the swarms, the Nurglings, because they only have a 5-up regen. And obviously they've got a 5-up ward as well. If you get them to a 5-up... Sorry, they have a 6-up regen. If you get them to a 5-up regen and you take a lot of them, that might be a problem, potentially. That's the sort of way that I could see that you could theoretically break it. But if you look at the stuff in Nurgle in general, you've got the Great Unclean One, has a 5-up regen. If you look at the Plague Drones, they've got a 5-up regen now. What else is there? Is that all of that? Oh, I've skipped past the Beast of Nurgle. They've got a 5-up regen. So I don't think having an aura of 5-up regen is necessarily too good, because I'm not super worried about having lots of units of Plague Bearers, but maybe it's too good just because you can spam out loads of Nurglings and give them a 5-up regen. So one to be looked at, but yeah, giving the Herald and the unit a 5-up regen is nice. Don't get me wrong, that is good. I'm just not super worried about it as a expensive BSB upgrade where you're spending lots of points to put it in a bubble. Other than that, the Palanquin has been changed. It's now heavy infantry, so you're not going to be targeted by enemy shooting, and it also brings it in line with the shield bearers, the way that, you know, obviously having it the same there is good. And then making it a 60 by 60 max means that it fits into the unit of 30 by 30 infantry. So just a good change there. Basically just brings it in line with what the, you know, you'd expect to see from shield bearers, which is the analog for this in terms of it existing in the core game. Plague Bearers, something I didn't mention, all of the infantry go down to 5+. This is fine. I don't have strong feelings on this. I don't really care too much because in the current game, I don't feel like there's much reason to take, especially heavy infantry like this, and be able to take them in small units. Maybe for Tzeentch, you take units of 5 with a wizard and you just try and spam out spellcasting, but that I think has risks inherent. Anyway, Plague Bearer is down to 12 points per model. It's still just super pricey. I know they've got a lot of stuff built in, but if you're paying 12 points per model, even if you look at like, I don't know, an elf core model or a dwarf core model, you're still only paying like 8 points or something for their basic core infantry. So 12 points, you do get stuff on top of there, but it is very, very pricey. And I know they've always been expensive, but yeah, dropping down to 12 points doesn't worry me at all. The only other change here is that you can take demonic gifts up to 25 points. A change, again, that we've seen on all of them. Is what it is. Beast of Nurgle, they've gone from 2 to 1, which makes them so much more playable, and they've gone from close order to open order, so they get a pivot at the end of their move. I think this makes them actually pretty interesting. They are not super killy, but they're quite tanky and fairly annoying. So I think this is, you know, just being able to take this as a chaff drop that can run around, can do things. I think I think they're very interesting, and I'm sure people will be able to get good value out of them. The fact that they're monstrous infantry, so that they don't disrupt flanks. Where am I going with that? I'm thinking unit strength 10, so that doesn't even make a difference. The fact that they're monstrous infantry, so the unit strength 3, they can't go up and, you know, get baggage trains or stuff on their own, is its own issue there. But yeah, if you want to do that, take a different unit or take 2 of them. So yeah, I think this is interesting, and I think open order is a good change for them. Obviously, they weren't going to be getting the combat res from close order anyway, so changing it to give them that pivot if you just do a normal move is quite nice. Nurglings, they have scouts. They had scouts for a while. It hasn't been a problem. Maybe there's a problem now that you can give them a 5-up regen and you can do some sort of jail list, but because you can't comfortably get the character up the board, you'd have to do some trailing, which will work. I don't know. I'm not super worried about this, but maybe there's something in here as a combination that makes you go, oh, actually, this is awful to play against. Plague drones save the same points. The unit champion can take demonic gifts. The Plague Proboscis has gone down in points because it was honestly kind of crap, and why would you buff your initiative when your initiative is 2? It feels fairly pointless. Venom Sting is just generally a good upgrade, and now it is better because you're going from making lots of AP 0 attacks with your hand weapons to being able to take all of your attacks at AP 1 Armor Bane 1 plus the Armor Bane 2 there. So I think this is honestly a pretty big glow up for the Plague Drones, which are a unit that I think had play previously. They now just have a little bit more oomph in combat. You've got, you know, each model has 3 attacks that are Strength 5, AP 1, Armor Bane 3, and then also 1 attack that's Strength 1, Armor Bane 1, all of its poison, all of its 5-up regen. I think it's just solid. It feels very playable. He's got it labeled here as like, maybe this is too good. I think it's fine. For 63 points, I think that's fine, given that they're not the killiest. If they had a 4th wound, I'd be worried, but I think where they are right now, they feel okay. I'm not concerned about them. The thing that I'd be highlighting is the fact they're fly 9 Swift Stride. Why are they so fast? Nurgle, you know, that's bizarrely fast. But anyway, I think they're pretty solid. On to Slaanesh, and here's the first one that I'm actually not 100% sure how I feel on it. So, the Keeper of Secrets has up until this point, always been second fiddle to the Lord of Change, because the Lord of Change is just faster. It has a fly move. It's a lot more maneuverable, and it's a better caster. It's more consistent. It's got more pluses to cast. It knows more spells. That's its own thing. The Keeper of Secrets here is now faster, so that's good. It's gained evasive, which is a rule we've talked about in terms of Slaanesh and being able to run away. I don't hate that, although I think evasive on big things just leads to gotcha movements. I hate it on the Wood Elf dragons, but that's a separate topic. Stomps are up to D3+1, and it's also got a hand weapon. The reason for that is just to make it clear that you can still buy Aetherblade on this thing if you want to try and do Spectral Doppelganger with Aetherblade. It gives you the options there. Stat-wise, it's gone from movement 8 to 10. It's gone from weapon skills 7 to 9, and it's gone up to initiative 8, which I don't know where it was before, because that's kind of not that relevant. Yeah, interesting. It's got a Killing Blow Strikes First Impaling Claws already. It can be a wizard. It can be a level 4 wizard. You can give it the +1 spell known upgrade now. It's still only casting at +2, but it's also still got the problem that it's always had, which it is made out of tissue paper. All it has is a 5-up ward save. And I think that's the problem with it. It doesn't have any real way to make it harder to kill, which I think is probably bad. So, yeah, I don't know how you make the Keeper of Secrets more goodera, other than just giving it more defensive stats, which doesn't really feel in line with what we're going with here. But I think I'm still not super excited about the Keeper. Maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, stuff like evasive doesn't save it from cannonballs, unfortunately, because you don't target the unit, so you can't evasive away from it, and that's kind of the thing that's going to kill it the quickest. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe now it can flee. It's got more play. I don't think it's bad. I just think if you put it next to the Lord of Change, especially with the Lord of Change buffs that we'll talk about more when we get to it, I struggle to want to take it. But maybe I'm wrong. This is one that I definitely feel uncomfortable in terms of having definitive opinions on. The Herald. As with the Nurgle Herald, it's now a default level 1 wizard, and its points cost is the same, so it's just gained that for free. Its demonic locus is strikes first. So their unit gets strikes first, and you can also bring a bubble of strikes first. It means that your infantry should be able to hit before they get hurt, but yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. I don't think that the infantry has the punch to make the difference. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Maybe this is verging into the old days of elves with always strikes first. But then they also had rerolls to hit, right? Because they had always strikes first. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this isn't a problem given the units that it affects, but maybe it is. I mostly like the chariots. I don't think I'm objective at all about Slaanesh. I think it's probably still kind of pants in terms of the output, but I just look at the chariots and I'm like, man, I want to play these. So yeah, that's kind of where I've looked at the Herald the most. The fact that it's a level 1 wizard for free and you can take illusion, so you can glittering robes, I don't hate that at all. I wish you had a way of taking demonic vessel more consistently, because then I think maybe we're talking here with some heralds on steeds, but yeah, by the by. It's by the by. Then we've got the Steed of Slaanesh hasn't changed. Cool. Demonettes. They've gone from 5 inches to 6-inch move. This feels pretty fast. It's probably fine. But, like, elves are only movement 5. I don't know if I think of Demonettes as faster than elves. But again, like, they're a squishy infantry unit in a game that's just punishing to be an infantry unit, right? So maybe I don't care at all. So let's see how that one goes out. I don't think it needs to be tweaked necessarily. I don't think there need to be higher weapon skill. I think they should double down on what they're good at, and they should be more glass cannon, more attacks, not necessarily more quality. The unit champion can have demonic gifts, and they've been changed from close order to open order. Sure. That makes sense. Losing the combat res sucks a little bit, but you get more mobility, so it comes out in the wash, I think. Seekers of Slaanesh. These things are changed a little bit cheaper, and the unit champion can have the demonic gifts, but they still, I think, just don't have the punch that they need, realistically, unfortunately. So you're going to have a lot of strength 3 attacks, some of which are AP1, some of which are just have armor bane. So, yeah, they're still kind of the same. As I want to be clear, as a role player, I think this is a very good unit. It is a skirmish unit with Swift Stride. It can also open order. It's got fast cavalry. It's got the ward save. It's got countercharge. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really good. It's just I think they need more oomph. If you want to play mono Slaanesh, I feel like Seekers of Slaanesh need more oomph. Especially because if we're looking at the Keeper of Secrets, it feels so underwhelming compared to its competitors. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. I'd like just more out of Slaanesh. Fiends, down to 46 points. You can take them in units of 2 now. And the Venomous Tail, the famed Venomous Tail, ruiner of fun for Orcs and Goblin players more than anyone else. Now it's a may make one of its attacks with this bad weapon instead of having to. Because instead you've got Piercing Claws. So Piercing Claws here are actually pretty decent. It means you've got 4 attacks at Strength 4, AP 1, Armor Bane 1. It's not terrible. You've also got Soporific Musk, so you can you turn off strikes first and you give them strikes last as well. It's still models. I wish it was units instead of models, so they could be more useful as a support piece. But it is what it is there. I think Fiends look pretty damn playable. Although I don't think they should have close order. I feel like they should have open order. You know, if we're making changes to other things, I think this unit getting open order as well would make a lot of sense. Open order and fast cav probably, honestly. Just give them the ability to march and pivot. That, I think, would feel pretty good for them. Like, if you want to make Slaanesh faster, that's probably the way I do stuff. Like, you know, go to open order, which he's changed up here. You know, that makes sense to me. Make this your open order. Give it fast cav as well. Make it so that you can march 16 inches and then do a turn at the end. And you're like, oh, hey, I've got mobility. I can do things. The chariots. These are my favorite. So the Hellflayer gets cheaper. I need to go down and actually have some point-to-point comparisons. So Hellflayer is down for 145 points. And it's gained AP1 on its impact hits. It's gone from close order to open... close order to open order, which again... You're a light chariot. You never had combat res for close order. This is not a downside. This is only an upside. Although, yeah. Only an upside. There is no downside here. 2d6 plus 1, strength 4 hits, impact hits at AP1. That's just cool. It's got first charge. It's got counter charge. I think it might be decent. Maybe. I want to play him. I want to play him. I want to play him. That's where I'm at with this. I'm sorry that I'm not giving objective analysis. I think the chariots are still probably not good enough. We're not in a meta where chariots are super good, but it's chariots with Swift Stride, so maybe I'm wrong. Like, they've got really long range, and they're kind of tanky. My big problem with chariots previously, for, like, whenever you've heard me talk about chariots, I go, they kind of suck, because you've only got 4 wounds, and you've got, like, a 3-up armor save, so you just die to a cannonball. Or, you know, you look very vulnerable to incoming damage. But having that layered save on there, even though you've only got a 5-up armor save and a 5-up, like, and then a 5-up ward, that's not bad. You've got 4 attacks from the crew, you've got 2 attacks from the steed, you've got 3 attacks from the Allurus. I think it might just be decent. It's fast. I don't know. I want to see them. I want to play them. I want to collect them. But their models seem like, honestly, a bit of a nightmare. They're pretty cheap, though. You can only buy them on the web store, but I think they're like 25 quid a pop, which by Games Workshop standards is very cheap. But also probably a nightmare to build. Anyway, I think my general thoughts, probably still better if you've got characters on them, although I don't think you can put characters on the Hellflayer. I think that's the one that you can't put them on. Let me just double check. Yeah, you can take the Seeker and the Exalted Seeker chariot. I wish you could put them on the Hellflayer. That'd be cool, because that's the one with all of the impact hits. But, yeah, I think this is probably the best chariot if you don't put someone on it, but if you do put someone on it, then it's going to be probably one of the other 2. Obviously, you can't put someone on the Hellflayer. What I mean is, these are better because you can put someone on it, but if you want to take a solo chariot, this is where I'd start. There we go. Seeker Chariot. This is the bog standard, comes in units of 1 to 3. You can put characters on them as well. Armor save 5, ward save 5, AP 1 on the impact hits. Only D3 plus 1 impact hits there, but still pretty good. Counter charge, Swift Stride, first charge as well. All of the things you kind of want to see. The actual output that they have is kind of lower, but they're only 85 points, and you can stack them with a level 1 illusion wizard. So maybe that just gives them enough oomph to get them there. I think I like them in smaller units, frankly. I don't know that I want to go super big with them. I think it'd be hard to go big enough to be excited to run them. Like, you could run 2 plus 2 wizards, and that feels like it's way loads of points for something that I don't know that it does what you want it to do. But yeah, Demonic Charge AP1 feels great on here. I'm a big fan of that. Exalted Seeker Chariot goes up a wound, goes down in points to 140, gains counter charge, doesn't have Swift Stride, but it does have First Charge still. And this is a unit strength 5 heavy chariot. Keeping close order probably makes sense. It's got lumber on there, so it doesn't need open order. I'd maybe just change it to open order in general. Like, everything for Slaanesh having open order, I think, just makes thematic sense. Yeah, this feels fine. I think, even though you've got all of this crew, and you've got all of these impact hits, I think maybe it's just the Seeker Chariot that you go with, because I really value, even though you've still got move 9 on this one, I really value the Swift Stride. I don't know. More testing is needed. Also, this base size is ludicrous. So if you want to just take, Seeker Chariots, small footprint, put characters on or in with the units, feels pretty good to me. Yeah, I'm a fan of that, and I'd like to play around with the chariots more. That's my incredible, review of the chariots. These look fun. Want to play them. AP good. I did just have a thought before I scrolled off. I actually think point for point, these are pretty solid. Like, if you look, you've got a T4 4-wound chariot for 85 points with a 5 up armor save and a 5 up ward. If you compare them to the very, very cheap ones that you can get for Tomb Kings, which are like half the price, less than half the price, you get +1 wound, you get plus, got a 5 up ward save, you've got AP on there as well, you've got more impact hits. There's a lot that you gain over the top of it, and I think that makes them a lot more compelling. Plus the characters that you can put on here. While you can't put like a Tomb King in the way that you can you can do some sort of weird Death Star with the Royal Heralds as well. I think just the cheap units with the cheaper characters you get more out of for Slaanesh than you do out of Tomb Kings. So yeah, big fan of this. Last and most tricky of the Chaos Gods, Lord of Change. I have already talked about the issue with Master of Sorcery and how it interacts with the Twin Heads, where you can take spells from 2 lords. We don't need to necessarily do that again. But this is down in points, I think, 340. Oh no, up in points. So it used to be a level 2 wizard for 310, now it's a level 3 wizard for 340. This is the first one that changing it makes sense to me. I think making it be a level 3 wizard kind of just makes sense. I don't think there's any way that that's ever going to be a downside. Theoretically, if you're playing some sort of event that is too low to have a level 3 wizard, you probably shouldn't be running a Lord of Change. So I think it's all just fine. And thematically makes sense. You've got 5 spell laws here. You can, with, as mentioned with Master of Sorcery and Twin Heads, you can do too much stuff, but you can also run kind of like a Blaster Caster with that in terms of just getting a kind of unreasonable number of spells. You could go Wind Blast and Battle Magic and Pink Fire of Tzeentch, and then go for spell number 4, which I guess would probably still be Arcane Urgency. You've got built-in +1 to cast because you're Tzeentch, which is very good. You are immune to panic, which is sure, whatever. Yeah, Lord of Change still does what it does before, does it better than before. Either Master of Sorcery or Twin Heads needs to change. Probably don't pay for the Tzeentchian Wand. Moving on. The Herald. So this is the only one that hasn't changed that can cast because it was already a level 1 wizard. It can still go up to level 3 as you'd expect it to see. You can't run the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch, which feels like a weird thing to drop in my mind. I don't really understand that. They may have said in the video, but by the time I got to that point, it was pretty late, and I haven't had a chance to rewatch. This is probably a problem. This is... When I say probably a problem, this is definitely a problem, because what you do is you take the Herald, you give it the BSB upgrade, you run it around behind the Lord of Tzeentch, and if you ever roll that 6, a 4-up save rerolling wands, a 4-up ward save rerolling wands is a disgusting level of consistent passing your ward saves. It is too much. Too much. I might edit in a bit at the front. Val asked me for a gut check on demons before he went public with them, and I said, don't, I said I firmly disagree with these choices, which he didn't agree with me, and that's fine. But this is one of the things that I said. This is probably fine unless you have access to a 4-up ward save. Never combine the two. It's just too good. You shouldn't be able to do the two of those. So that needs to be changed. It's too consistent. I mean, if you keep this and you're capped on a 5-up ward save, I'm absolutely fine with it, and it actually kind of feels like thematic, and it works, and it's in line with things that I've seen for Tzeentch before. Just get rid of the fucking table. It doesn't work. Anyway, Disc Tzeentch, now 35 points. How many points was it before? It was 20 points. Interesting. And it now gives you +1 toughness, and it's monstrous cavalry instead. So it's unit strength 3, and it's +1 toughness. I have looked through this pretty comprehensively, but this is something that I've missed because I think it's such like a lower level change. I guess it didn't catch my eye at the time. +1 toughness is obviously good. Getting up to toughness 4. Yeah, getting up to toughness 4 is nice. There's no plus wound, which is a little bit rough, but that is what it is. Okay. I'm not really sure how I feel about that change. There's nothing it can join, is there? Flamers aren't monstrous cavalry. No, they're regular infantry. Screamers are monstrous cavalry. Okay, so you can join it to a screamer. Okay. Sure. I don't really have any thoughts on that right now. Maybe that's something that, yeah, I don't know. That's what I need to think about. I've somehow missed that the first time round, and yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one. Anyway, we'll come back to that maybe. But otherwise, plus points for going up in toughness, sure, that's fine. It's worth the points you pay for it. Pink Horrors, this needs to be changed because there isn't an upgrade that's 25 points or less unless he's edited one in already. I saw that he'd said that. Icon of Sorcery, that's not Icon of Sorcery, yeah, 20 minutes. Yeah, okay, so there's nothing that you can take for 25 points, I believe, on here, which is why it's highlighted yellow. I'm sure that will be changed at a later point. They've got open order instead of close order. That makes sense. They shouldn't be that good in combat, but they should be mobile. And then the change to the casting, I think, is good. I don't think they should be able to take... Oh, no, they can't take pink fire. They can take blue fire. So they can take glittering robes, pink fire, gift of mutation. All of those things are fine to take. I don't have any issues with them taking any of those. And if you take the banner, you can upgrade pink fire by strength and AP up to, +2 strength and AP, depending on your rank bonus from the magic banner upgrade there. So that's okay. That's fine. Blue Horrors, just as they were. I quite like Blue Horrors, although they are still a little bit pricey, just in terms of... All demon stuff is pricey, so it is what it is. I think they're fine in terms of, in my mind, they have a space. I definitely drop them down to 5+. If you've dropped everything else down to 5+, oh, Pink Horrors haven't been dropped. Maybe that's so you can't spam them with the Iridescent Horror and the Standard Bearer. Because if you were able to take units of 5, it'd be 72 points. So 4 by 72 points, 288. That's 4 magic missiles for just over half your core points. Yeah, that's probably too good. So leave that the same, sure. The Blue Horrors, I think, could drop down to 5+, though. I don't think there's any issue with that. Flamers of Tzeentch. This is good. I like the changes here. What has the changes been? Were they 3 wounds before? They were 3 wounds. Down to 2 wounds is interesting, but then the points is different. So basically, all that's happened is the stat line is brought more in line for the Exalted Flamer to the Flamer. And that's because you've got to pay multiple times, right? So you can run around Flamers. The way Flamers work is you've got a unit of them. They're regular infantry. They are skirmish, so they're -1 to be shot. Generally quite nice to have. They have the Warp Flame, which is D3+1 shots now as opposed to D3 shots. So they're like an okay shooting unit, but they're very pricey. They're 2 wound models. Their only defense is being skirmish and having a 5-up ward save, which is not terrible. And the ballistic skill 4. So they kind of just exist in a weird space where they can fly around as a skirmishing, harassing shooting unit, which is not something that's super valuable in the game with the amount of output they have. However, the unit champion can be upgraded the second time to become a wizard, and that wizard can become a level 3 wizard, and then you're able to take spells from one of these laws here. Yeah, I don't really have any strong opinions on him changing the stat line to only have 2 wounds instead of 3, and being 30 points instead of 40. Sure, you don't really care about paying for the wound. I guess just standardizing it to being +30 points for +1 level of wizardry kind of makes sense to me, so I'm not opposed to that. And that 3rd wound is kind of kind of surplus. So yeah, this feels fine to me, I think, in terms of the changes there, and most importantly, that you can take the, I've forgotten the name of it, the Tzeentch upgrade that gives you -1 to be shot. So you can layer that so that you're -2 to be shot by ballistic skill shooting, which is quite nice. This is a unit that is worried about ballistic skill shooting. And then you've got a level of protection from enemy incoming magic missiles, because you've got a wizard in the unit as well. So assuming you've got level 3, you'll be dispelling at +2. You could even take the upgrade on this character that gives them the ability to, -1 to enemy casting within your casting range. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do here. Flamers were pretty decent, like before. They were one of the few units that you saw people looking at running, and they are definitely better here. So some decent changes, making them a little bit cheaper is probably for the best, and also being able to take the -1 to be shot upgrade on there is nice as well. Brimstone Horrors, it's a swarm that is unstable. I always worry about that. But, they're pretty cheap as swarms go for 6 wounds with a 5 at ward save, so maybe there's something there. I probably wouldn't bother with them. I think there's other stuff you can do, but maybe I'm wrong there. Just not something I've played around with much, but my gut feel is that they don't make the cut because they are unbreakable. Maybe it's just numbers, right? If you take 4 of them, that's 24 wounds for not that many points. 154? 152? Yeah, anyway. Something to think about. Screamers being changed to Monsters Cavalry is interesting, and they've gone down to a min unit size of 2+, and they don't have Loner as well. So this is a real change in how they're functioning. They can still do the same thing as before, but now they can buddy up and be sort of a bunker for you to run a wizard around in, which is interesting, because putting 1 wizard in with the Screamers at the cost that they are is not that exciting, but having multiple Screamers and multiple wizards, maybe you can fly around and do something a little bit heinous with. So this is something that I would keep my eye on, the ability to join them. I'm not really sure why. Obviously, it kind of goes counterproductive with what you're trying to do, because you want to fly over or get into combat with them, so you're probably marching or charging if you can, whereas the wizards want to be running around and casting. But we've seen big units with casting bunkers, so maybe this is something that you can play around with. Not 100% sure on that one, but yeah. Going up to AP1 on the slashing attack is nice, and it's not per model, it's just you can, go over the top and do some wounds. So honestly, taking a couple of small units of these might not be the worst thing to do. If you're not sure what to spend points on, 170-ish, 176 maths, 170-ish points. If you want to spend the points for 2 units of 2 for slashing attacks, to just go over there each turn, do D3 strength, 4 hits at AP1. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can fly around, you can do baggage trains with them. They're a little pricey to do that, but I think they're not bad. Not bad at all. Chariot of Tzeentch. This is exactly the same as it was, no differences, and yeah, I still think they're completely fine, because you take them, you get to 6 wounds, you've got the layered save, you've got a 4 up armor save, you've got a 5 up ward save. If you like having casters on chariots that can fly, you can, be happy with that. It's, it doesn't really fit what I want to do with my wizards, but I guess you've got a level of how do I keep them safe, right? So maybe this is the way to do that. But yeah, I think heralds are best if you spam them, and this stops you from spamming them as easily. Is the main thing to take away there. Burning Chariot. This is no longer something you can run as a mount, which means that you can't have the double wizard on there, which is a change that I don't really understand, but I also don't have strong feelings on. It's just a 140-point chariot that's a level 1 wizard that's casting at +2, and you're probably taking, like the summoning. Or I guess you're theoretically taking Pink Fire if you've got... it doesn't look like they've got Lore of Tzeentch. I don't think that's on... Oh no, Lore of Demons here. So yeah, I guess you just take Pink Fire instead of the summoning. Yeah, generally, if you want more casters, this is the way to fit them in. You can put a lot of casters in a list. It does worry me, just having the consistency of how many casters you can have. It was something that you could play around with before, but if demons get better rules around that, maybe it makes them a little bit more concerning to play against. So, yeah, no real thoughts there other than 140 points. They used to be 160, 190. Oh my god, that is a big points drop. Huh. Well, that's very spammable then. Very spammable. They're in rare, but you can take them in. Take one in special if your general is Tzeentch, right? I think that's how that works. Do Burning Chariot. Okay, so you could take 3 of these, but at 140 points, that is 3. What's that? 280. Yeah, that's less than 500 points. So you could just go full magic missile spam by going triple Burning Chariots, and then as many, like 1,000 points of casters, and then also going core casters as well. It's a lot of magic missiles. It's a lot of magic missiles. I don't know that that's right, but just that level of spam does worry me in terms of brain off, bring as many models as possible and go. I think 140 points is probably too cheap. Because even at its core, it's a 4 wounds chariot with a 4-up save and a 5-up ward, and it's only slightly more expensive than a Black Orc chariot. And then it's also a level 1 wizard. Obviously, it's not comparable in terms of melee, but it is still a flying chariot with impact hits, and it has the slashing attack as well. I don't know. This feels like it's maybe too good. It also has some shooting as well from the Flames of Tzeentch. It's not good shooting, but it is on there. You know, this is very comparable in my mind to a Skycutter, but just a little bit scarier, I think. No Swift Stride. Yeah, I don't know. 140 points is very, very cheap. I think a 50-point cut is wild to go for on first pass. That's a big jump. Anyway, let's move past that one. I'll be honest, when I was looking at Tzeentch, I was mostly just, looking at the Lord of Change and the shenanigans you can do there, but obviously, a couple of things I missed on my first couple of passes round. Then we've got the Demon Prince. I love this change here. The fact that you can go up to a 60 by 60 base is, do I want to bunker a Demon Prince in a unit of infantry? Not all the time. The infantry's kind of crap. But you can go 5 spells Demonology, and you can fly around and you can do Demonic Vessel, Steed of Shadows, all of that good stuff there. So having that is just nice. Yeah, I really like the change here to be able to put them inside of units. And obviously, you could attach them to the outside of units, but that was kind of clunky, and it made you churning circles pretty long. And then also having a 5-up regen. This was obviously in previously, but seeing that there is good to have, as opposed to just having it on the Warriors of Chaos version and not having it on the Chaos Demons version. So, yeah, Demon Prince, honestly, very tempted to take infantry bricks and put Demon Prince inside of them, take that 5th spell and try and play around with Steed of Shadows so you can get around the board. I think this unlocks a lot of play for the faction, and then they're a pretty okay melee beater. They're very pricey is the problem. You're looking at 310, 320 points before you do anything else if you want to make them a wizard. So, well, because you're going for the demon to join the unit as well. But yeah, I think there are worse things you can do with your character points, and you've got like a halfway decent character in there as well. The fact that you've only got an ensorcelled hand weapon kind of sucks, because 5 attack, strength 6, AP 1 is a little bit mid, but you can obviously buy Aether Blade or something else like that. Or just lean on Demonic Vessel, maybe. Maybe that's the way that you go for it. So yeah, Demon Princes. I liked them before. I think it was mostly like a Blastercaster version. Now I'm much more interested in seeing them inside units. Now that you can do this, it just makes them a lot easier to put inside and do things there. And obviously they have got a 4 ward save, which is worth pointing out for sure. Furies, marked as yellow, might need some upgrades because they have built in... Oh, he's taken the Furious Charge off. I don't really know why he's done that. There was some explanation for it in his notes, but I just skimmed them earlier. Sure, I mean, you can make them Khorne, get +1 strength and Furious Charge, and make them good again, or you can take any of the other upgrades that nobody took before. So, realistically, if you're paying the 2 points you were paying before for Demons of Khorne, you're giving them Furious Charge, you're giving them +1 strength. That's exactly where they were before. They're fine. They're solid, they're played a lot, they're mostly played a lot because all of the other options are dog water around them. They're okay, 2 attacks at strength 5 AP 1 on the charge is not awful, but it's also not as good as it sounds like it should be. Weapon skill 3, you're only hitting on 4s into most targets. You kind of want to play around with Battle Lust, which is very difficult to do. They're regular infantry. None of the heralds are able to join them if you give them the upgrade, the Winged Horror upgrade. So, yeah, I don't think these need to be changed. They could just go back to the way they were before. I don't really see any value in that. finally, we've got the Soul Grinder. I am a huge fan of the Soul Grinder. Big, big, big fan. And the points level, I'm going to have to just double check, but I think this means you can take 2 at 500 points, which you weren't able to do before. Yeah, there we go. It used to be 255 points, so there's no way you could take 2 at 1,000 points. These things are great. And by great, I mean completely fine. But I do like them. I think it's a good example of what a pricey monster can be. So the way that they work is they're pretty fast, which is surprising. They're close order and they're behemoths. They've got a lumber, so you can move 8 inches, then you do a lumber. You've got shooting in there. You've got Baleful Torrent, which we'll get to the weapons in a second. So you can do your shooting attack if you want to, and then you've got reserve move as well, so you get to move twice. The fact that they look like crabs is kind of fitting, because you get to like scuttle around the battlefield. You can move 16 inches with two lumbering pivots in there, which is really, really nice. Off the top of my head, it's the only unit that has reserve move and a 90-degree lumber, like a lumber specifically, on there, which is pretty good. Other than that, they've got D6+1 stomp attacks, so they're a proper behemoth. They have terror. They've got furious charge. You can give them marks. All of that is great. They've got a built-in gun, which is the Baleful Torrent here, which is a column of fire flamethrower. You can also pay points to upgrade them to just having, you know, a different gun. But honestly, it doesn't matter too much. You've also got built-in a cannon that does grape shot as well. I think these things are great. I'm a huge, huge fan of a Soul Grinder. I haven't put one on a table in a long time. This makes me go, I want to try and run a list with 2 of them. I think it's a point of like direct power you can play around. How do they face off into the meta? Really poorly. They die to Cathay. They die to cannons. They die to Spectral Doppelganger Monkey King. They die to Viletide. They die to dragons. Like, they don't necessarily play super well in the meta. But they're very cool, and now you can take 2 of them, and they've got a built-in extra gun just for free. Fun. I like it. I'm very keen to play around with a couple of these. And I think if you're playing something, especially something a little bit squishier, maybe if you're playing Slaanesh, I could see the Soul Grinders maybe having value as being something a little bit tankier that you can anchor your battle lines around, while other stuff is more mobile. Something to think about. But yeah, great changes. I like just making this 240 points instead of 255. I'm immediately happy. Anything else on top of there, I'm like, this is gravy, baby. It's up to full plate, which is really nice, going from a 4-up save to a 5-up save to a 4-up save. Obviously got the ward save built in as well. And the Phlegm Bombardment is upgraded to a proper... what was the Phlegm Bombardment before? I don't think I ever took it. Oh, it's just an additional weapon thrown in. Phlegm Bombardment. Alright, cool. There's just now... I thought I didn't recognize this. There's just now a stone thrower, like a warp-fired stone thrower built in there, which is fine. Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I don't think I'm paying 30 points for it. I think I just want to take 2, but it's nice to have the option in there as well. That takes us to the end of the review of the Demons. Obviously, thank you for watching, for getting to this point. If you are still here, you're welcome to put any thoughts you have about my thoughts on the Renegades, you know, whether or not this is in line with where things stand. I'm not really looking to have a debate about that in the comments. You're welcome to put your comments in. I will read them, but I'm not necessarily looking to have an online argument about it. I know it's a topic that's relatively divisive, which is one of the reasons that I held off on talking about it for a little while. I am curious to hear your thoughts on the sort of design space that each of the Chaos Gods should be in. I think that's really interesting. That's something that I'd like to explore more. And also, interested to hear if there's any changes that you think maybe could do with being rolled in. Basically, suggest more buffs for Slaanesh, my favorite thematic army on the tabletop. I want to go fast, I want to hit hard, and then I want to make mistakes and get crumbled. So, yeah, love to hear that if you've got any thoughts on the matter.